Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another exciting meeting of the Charlton Water and Sewer Commission. Today is September 10th, 2018. It's about 6:33 or 4 p.m., and we'll begin our meeting as usual. Oh, first of all, public forum. I don't see anyone here, but we'll begin our meeting as usual with Russ. You have either minutes or
Sure.
abatements, warrants, something for us?
Make a motion, we accept the minutes of August 20th, 2018, as printed.
Can I have a second on that, please?
Second.
Any discussion on them? No, if not, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Make a motion to accept the warrants as printed for September 10th, 2018, as follows. EDS Mechanical, AC Unit Breaker, $95. WB Mason, Water, $6.57. Toshiba, copy charge, quarterly copy charge, $39.86. LaForte Electric, 63 Old Worcester Road, $560. LaForte Electric, lighting upgrade, $4,500. KP Law, service through 7/31/18, $2,385.12. Viola, emergency services, June 2018, $240. Viola, June 2018, lab testing for 5E and 6W, $184. Jeff Helgerson Excavating, sludge from clarifier, $2,400. Franklin Electric, 14 North Sturbridge Road, $3,236.20. Commissioner's salary, month of September, $400, for a grand total of $14,046.75.
All right, here comes Mr. Lemansky. Any discussion on any of those charges?
Is there a second?
Oh, yeah, I need a second as well.
Jen, second.
Second.
Second for the motion. Sue, could you explain the $2,000, the Copeland and Page, the attorneys? That's more than the phone conversations I'm aware of, isn't it?
That's everything, the research, everything.
What other things do we have?
He sent an attached, an itemized bill. It's attached.
Would you like to see it, Paul, or read it?
Yeah, well, Sue and Peter verified it, that's all. There's a lot of things here, I didn't realize there were so many that this goes way back as well, so, all right. Did you have any, you didn't hear the reading of the warrants, but I don't know if you had any questions on any of them, if you read them at home on the computer, but.
No, I didn't.
Well, we got a motion and a second. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor of passing all these warrants, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. You got more for us?
Nope, that'll do it.
No
No
abatements?
abatements.
Okay, well, I think we can move right into our scheduled appointments. We have Catrioni Properties from Trolley Crossing Road first. Do you have something? Oh, you just,
Yep, we'll pass it around.
Thank you.
yeah. Yep, come on up and tell us what's on your mind.
Just to kind of go over again, my name is Zachary Gless. I'm from Existing Grade Incorporated. I'm the surveyor and engineer working with Nick Ciacciaroni, who brought with me as well, the client, to discuss the water line extension down Trolley Crossing. I know the last time that we had left off at the last meeting, we had a few questions for the client, so he's here to kind of directly answer those. And kind of pick back up, we had spoken with Miss Blakely over in Southbridge, and she has reviewed the project and is more or less on board with it, with a few questions that we're gonna kind of receive her approval on at the end, but I just kind of want to at least mention that she has reviewed it and is okay with the status of it and the design of it.
Have you had any conversations with Heather about this?
Yes. Yep, so I emailed Heather back and forth and talked to her during a couple of different meetings we were at, and she said that she's working with Zach and copied me on some emails about some clarifications that she was requesting, but everything seems to be moving forward fairly well. I guess the biggest question that you guys are gonna have to answer for Mr. Charcheroni is if there's gonna be a privilege fee, and if so, what's that gonna look like? Because he's extending the water line himself, will you choose to assess him with some type of fee? Or what's gonna be left for the abutters to pay for a fee who aren't part of, the people who are paying for this extension, so. That's probably one of the biggest discussions that we're gonna have to have as far as that water line goes. As far as the design of it goes, it's in your packet, it's pretty straightforward, there's really not much to worry about there. I believe there's just enough usage to handle Heather's concerns for a water age, so as long as that's met, the rest of it, again, is gonna be what the board decides to do with Mr. Charcheroni for a privilege fee.
How many abutters are there? We have, are the banks gonna be abutters, both banks, or are they already tied in somewhere?
If I may, so the bank building, the two banks, I believe, and the
Yep.
gymnastics center have chosen not to assist me only because they have water coming in right from they're already coming in, they have water coming in from Route 20. The bank is really right where the hydrant is.
Yeah.
They don't see an immediate need for it or a future need for it. I've have verbal agreements with the Howlett Lumber property owner.
There goes Alex.
His adjacent, I deal with Mr. Lisi, but Athanas, is that his last name, the owner there? Next to Howlett Lumber, the vacant land,
Mr. Thanes.
Athanas. Across the street, the Kamasis, the molding company, myself, and Rich K here next door to me. So I have agreements with all those abutters to help pitch in to some extent to bring that line in. So with the real, they view it as an insurance policy. If we help put the line in, what benefit do we have in the future? Any assistance that would be there for them, as opposed to me the other option was for me to come up the backyard into Route 20. In speaking with the building inspector, I think once I brought that up to him, he started reaching out to neighbors for me, knowing the benefit of me bringing the line up the street, it would help everybody in the long run, as opposed to me just coming under the backyard for myself. So I guess they're looking just for some sort of, something along the line, some benefit to their,
How many outlets or laterals would be left for Howlett? Because they have more than one building. They have the big building and then to the right.
I'm gonna
they-
put whatever outlets they need.
So,
I'm in discussions with them on design.
oh, okay.
Yeah,
How many properties would have new connections as opposed, like, what
4.
are properties tied in currently? So it's not technically.
well, I'll have a new connection,
But you were already connected before.
correct,
I'm saying brand new connections. How many properties?
just Howlett Lumber.
Just Howlett Lumber. Okay, so all the other properties, they've already been tied in previously, and now you're just increasing the size of the line, basically, that's gonna service
Correct.
them. So, added fire protection and more capability down the
Correct.
road. Okay.
Kamasi getting water from, was it a 2-inch line came across Route 20 there 2 or 3 years ago? No, is Kamasi
I think, I
at
can't
this
answer
time?
that
'Cause
question.
You didn't
I
mention,
believe
you
it's
said.
the same as yours.
how
I
many-
think, I would think it's the same as us, because they can't have much demand
Yeah,
for water,
that's true.
and for washing trucks down maybe at best, I don't know. But they are already connected.
All right. Probably get something to.
I guess, the ones who are already connected, they've already paid privilege fees. Is that
On the
correct?
backside.
To Southbridge, not to Charlton.
Okay, all right, but the South, they paid a connection
They
fee.
pay the connection fee to
Connection fee
Southbridge.
to
I don't believe
Southbridge.
anyone has paid any privilege fees to the town of Charlton.
Okay. Okay. Well, what fees did the Cedar Building pay? Have they paid fees in the past?
What's the Cedar building?
Well, I'm sorry, Mr.
No,
Chitrone.
the WSP building?
Yeah.
For sewer,
They paid for sewer,
yes,
but not for water.
correct. Not that I'm aware of. I don't believe the commission has ever assessed any type of privilege fee for water.
Okay.
I may be mistaken, but from what I've researched, I can't find anything. I know in the past, you've approved what you wanted to assess for a privilege fee, and I think that was mostly to deal with the Upham Farms, but I don't believe that was ever fully assessed or billed to them at that time.
That might be a administrative issue, not the fact that
It-
we have a privilege fee that's
could
in
be.
place.
You
for
do,
water.
you do have a voted privilege fee for water, yes.
Right.
But I believe all the other buildings were connected before that happened.
Okay, okay, so this would be the only one that's not, all right.
Have we had other businesses upgrade their services in the same manner?
For
Whereas they
water?
had, domestic tap before, and now they get fire suppression?
Not that I'm aware of.
No.
The only kind of
Isn't
similar,
there,
the only similar,
McDonald's and down in that area?
What?
McDonald's,
McDonald's,
Dunkin' Donuts? No.
they're connected, but they've always been connected. They haven't had to
Okay.
increase or run a new line. So the only thing you've done in the past, somewhat similar to this, is allowing Carl Storts to extend the sewer line and giving them a break on what you charge them for a privilege fee based on them having to incur a cost to put the line in themselves to get up to their building.
But that was sewer,
Correct.
right. And ever since the IMA, the town of Charlton, from the signing of IMA, now owns all of the pipes in the town of Charlton. And and I believe that that's the basis to where that joining the infrastructure that we had already put in, put us in the position to where the privilege fee then came about. Is because Charlton is in total control of the system within town. Okay, and I do agree that past precedence is that if someone was to come forward and install infrastructure, that what we did in the past was reduce the privilege fee by 50%. That's what we
Okay.
did on some of
That's
those.
what Carl Stores was, yeah.
Right, right. And again, because it hasn't been issued, whether it be the bill or the invoice to the Upham Farms, doesn't mean that, that we're still not gonna do it.
Okay.
Just we haven't done it as of yet, and I believe it's an administrative issue
Okay.
and not an intent, because if you review the minutes, it was discussed. So what's
The-
else?
The only other question for privilege fees then is this in the contaminated area where you're not going to be charging privilege fees anyways?
I don't, again, my recall leaves me on that, Peter. Where did we ever say if it's in contaminated area, we're charging privilege fees?
Well, there's no privilege fees for any of the properties on the school loop. There was no privilege fees for, North Side Road.
North Side Road was taken in two parts. North Side Road, I believe was an agreement with ExxonMobil, and that we had a list of people who wouldn't be charged, but doesn't exempt anybody who's not on that list,
Okay.
okay? And then on the school loop, because ExxonMobil was doing all of the infrastructure, plus they were doing the connections, plus they were paying the connection fee, is that it was agreed that there would be no privilege fee.
Okay.
So, I think in this case here, I mean, we can certainly consider it and vote on it, is waive the privilege fees because of all of the costs that they're doing to bring that water supply to those properties.
Good.
And the thing is, if someone else came along at a later point, then I think the privilege fees would stick.
Are you providing fire hydrants in
Yes.
the row? How many? Just
I
roughly.
can't answer, I know there's one at the end that I, for the blow off, but I'm not sure about.
Should we
Might give them the big bucks.
One other one, so there about, you said there's about 1,000 feet of main, correct, Zach?
Yeah, there's 1,600.
1,600, yeah.
Oh, so there might be two other ones.
There's one already at the beginning, one at the end, there might be one more in the middle.
Were you sure about the number of employees you're going to have? I thought there was some vagueness there as to part-time and
Well,
full-time.
the vagueness comes in to actual doctors that are there on a physical day. So a lot of times what these medical practices will do, they have a cardiologist that works out of Boston. He'll travel from Sterling to Auburn to Leicester to Worcester. Their name might be on the door, but they're there one day a week to service a certain amount of patients. And that's, and they have, so they have that, a lot of different practice, specialists will be in that building doing that same thing. We're putting an addition on the building. Right now, the building has a U shape. We're adding 3,000 feet in the middle as it's basically the waiting room. The whole right side of that building is radiology mammography. So those are just big rooms that don't occupy a lot of space. And the maternity, the OBGYNs might come in, there was 3 or 4 that work out of there, but they're not there all day long. They're in the hospital one day delivering. So there's a lot of overlap. So I think the ambiguity is, there might be a list of doctors on the window or on the directory, but they're not all there at the same time.
So it's a little difficult to come up with a Title V estimate.
It's a little difficult to do that, and, you know, I've mentioned to Peter, I don't mind, I expect them, we expect to have them in first of the year. I expect them to be up and running at capacity within a year. I would say within 2 years, we know what we're using for usage. I wouldn't mind coming back after 2 years, taking a look at it at that point.
Mr. Chair, that question is more towards sewer and how we're gonna assess a privilege fee based on Title V numbers, which is based on 250 gallons per day per doctor.
And we've been doing it on Title V numbers.
Correct.
Not on meter reads, so.
Correct, so sewer's a little more straightforward. The only ambiguity is if there's gonna be 4 full-time doctors and then 1 or 2 part-time doctors, is there some common ground that we can agree on now to charge them a Title V number based on 4.5 or 5 doctors, and then maybe do a look again in 1.5 years or 2 years? Or it's more, I guess, what everyone's comfortable with, just so we're all in agreement to start and when that look back will be, to make sure that, again, we're not overcharging them and they're not underpaying us.
I would think that this building has been recorded as an office building, 11,000 square feet, is that?
Yes.
Yeah, 11,000 square feet. If they're adding 3,000 square feet of office space, whether there's a doctor in it or whether it's just straight office, I think it ought to be assessed as a straight office. Then you do a look back 2 years from now and then look at the water usage. If it exceeds what the office space would exceed, then we need to have a sit down. For instance, if he put an ophthalmologist in there, the ophthalmologist is gonna use 0 gallons of water. I mean, you know, other than trying to rinse out some tissues because people's eyes are watering. I mean, you know,
But the
again,
patients will use the restroom. So Title V is
it's
specific,
just like an office.
but Title V is specific for a doctor's office. It doesn't go by square footage, it goes by number of doctors.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
And also, I think that, had you spoken this last time, Zach, when you were here, about other properties and their usage, as far as doctor's offices?
Well, I know Mr. Chatteroni has other properties that are very similar to this one with their, operational usages, which are
Right.
much lower than we're estimating for this facility.
Okay. I guess to my point is that if it says it's 250 gallons a day, so, and it's based on 7 days, what are you looking at, 1,600 gallons, 1,650 gallons a week?
A week.
A week. yeah, times, the thing is, has any of the water bills ever come close to Title V?
No, not on his other properties.
Right, yeah, and we also know that Title V has the built-in safety factor, but we were going by that standard. But I think if you apply this, that, from an income point of view, the town water sewer commission, if we just stuck to just straight office, I think that we may even be doing better. And also, we would be covering ourselves as far as the future goes, because let's say the use changes and goes back to office. Then we'd have to say, whoops, we need to charge you a new surcharge. Because, Zach, have you done that for straight office space, 3,000 square feet, according to Title V? As far as the Title V number for straight office space?
Let me know, it's 75 gallons per 1,000 square feet.
Okay, so
What are-
that's
what are the
75,
numbers you're
150?
using for your water age?
Yeah,
I'm sorry?
What are the numbers you're using for your water age study?
Those are based upon
Actual usage.
actual
Mhm.
usage of the,
So between Minutia Tool and the building as it currently sits, it's right around 800 gallons per day. So they're currently using over 400 gallons per day.
400 gallons per day. And we're saying for 4 doctors, that's 1,000.
I'm not, how many doctors are there now?
Right now, 2 or 3.
So
Yeah.
2 doctors would be
Yeah.
500. It's
I
just-
know myself, having personal knowledge between Title V and actual usage is, we all know, Title V is made for construction of a septic system, and they automatically have a safety factor, I believe, of 200% there. So if they think you're gonna use 200 gallons, they want you to design for 400 gallons. And those numbers that are listed in Title V are design flow numbers, because if you read the last paragraph of that whole section, it says that if it's not listed there, what you're supposed to do is find a similar use somewhere else and then double the number, which, supports the fact is that you've got a 100% safety factor in there. So, again, my opinion is I think we ought to look at that space as 3,000 square feet of office, in that we put in a caveat that we look back at it in 2 years from now, and we look at the water usage. If it's out of bounds, then we have to come back, but if it's not, then I think we leave it just the way it is. So, that's where I'm coming from.
You want to agree at this time that since they're putting in the infrastructure, we would give them a 50% discount on whatever figure we come up with? I mean, that to me is what we've done in the past. I don't know why we wouldn't do that. But
The only difference is that, there's already water on Route 20. There's already water that abuts all those properties there. Again, I don't have a problem with waiving any of the privilege fees.
For
Just
water.
For water.
Yeah.
Right, just for the
So-
fact of what they're doing is it's, as we all know, this is for fire protection. That's what all this is about. This is to make sure that if in fact there's an issue there, that the people and the businesses from Charlton and the people that are in those buildings are gonna be protected either by sprinkler systems and/or the ability for the fire department to connect to fire hydrants. Again, protecting our people here in the town.
Absolutely.
So,
What's the closest distance to the hydrant that exists up there in the daycare now? Do you know offhand?
That's 1,600 feet from my prop. That's where we'd be coming.
we have a
No, there's-
proposed hydrant almost directly across the street from the existing daycare. And then we have
Okay.
a terminus one down at the end at Mr. Chatcherone's property.
Okay.
but isn't there an existing fire hydrant up at the corner?
There is up on H. Putnam, there's
Right.
an existing hydrant
Right,
right there,
so
right?
to your building, or the last building, that's about 1,500 or 1,600 feet.
Correct.
Yes.
So, and again, by adding those 2 fire hydrants, again, it creates more safety.
Have you, I know you've run the plan by Heather, but what about the Charlton Fire Department, the chief? Have you run that by them at all? Just for location of the hydrants?
Kurt, I've given it to Kurt Meskis.
Oh.
I've given him the,
Check that box.
I've given him
then.
that, and I've given him the sprinkler for the building already, yeah.
Yep, okay.
Yeah, he
Kurt
asked
has a
for,
lot of jobs, so he,
right, when you said chief, I know he's assistant, or, but I did give it to him, yeah.
I don't know if that's helpful or not, but what did you want to take home from this meeting tonight with us? Just some ideas like we've given you, or you're looking for any concrete facts? Well, I don't think we're about to set a privilege fee at this time, one way or the other, even if it's totally waive it. I think if we're gonna waive it, we ought to discuss it a little bit more at another time. And you are gonna be putting the water in, so certainly it'd be discounted at least 50%, if not more, like if not 100%. So what did you want to go away with from tonight, from here?
I mean, ideally, we'd like to try and vote on this and see if we can not have to come back again after we get Southbridge's approval and then discuss the,
I mean, you're all set for what you're doing, if I recall. It's just a privilege fee that we're talking about here, so.
I think I need for the water tie-in for my building permit, whatever, if there are any fees there for that, for tying in the new water line to the building.
So, actually, I think what you're looking for is the approval for a water extension,
Is that okay?
That's
technically,
correct.
Okay,
right? All right, so, I make a motion that we approve the water extension for, what's the name of that road?
Trolley Crossing.
For Trolley Crossing of 1,600 feet down to the Chatcheromy building.
I have a second.
I'll second for discussion.
All right, do you have discussion?
I do, I'd like to amend the motion, if I might, to also include language that would, upon letter from Southbridge stating you've completed their checklist and have satisfied all of their
yeah,
conditions.
pending approval from Southbridge.
Correct.
Sure.
I'd accept that.
Okay. Any other discussion on this? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Abstain.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
So you're all set.
Perfect, thank you.
Good
Thanks
luck
for
with
putting
it.
up fire hydrants in Charlton for us.
No problem. Thank you for allowing me to.
Next, we have the Charlton Finance Director. Donna, would you come up, please? Please introduce yourself formally.
Boy.
Good evening. I'm Donna Folio. I'm the town accountant and finance director for the town of Charlton. Peter had asked me to come in and give you an update on your finances. So I'm sending around two packets. One starts with W1 on the bottom and one starts with S1. One's water, one's sewer. I'll start with water first. One of the things that I had to do last year when I arrived was to segregate out fixed assets out of your enterprise fund. That was a request of the Department of Revenue. I did that. This is a separate fund altogether, but this represents your fixed assets for water. There were no additions this year, but there were depreciation, which is ongoing every year. That's the first page on W1. The second page, W2, is the debt snapshot of 2018. We had a lot of payoffs that we tried to do with MWPAT. There are two that still remain with them that we have not got a payoff from them, and one that was through U.S. Bank. So if you recall, there was funds appropriated from a reserve fund to pay for that. That is still sitting reserved to pay for that. I'll have to just, right now, we have to pay every year unless we can get MPWAT to allow us to pay early. The U.S. Bank, there is no provision to pay early, so we'll just have to pay that one down from that account. But you don't have to appropriate in your budget anymore because you've already, it's from that reserve.
If I may interrupt Donna for a second. First
Yeah.
off, thank you for coming and putting all this together. So we're on page W2.
Yep.
So you're saying that amount there of $382,270,000 is that the amount that we cannot pay off early?
Now, that 382,000 on the bottom right is just the total of what MWPAT had subsidized. So the
Okay.
line that you're looking for is kind of in the middle. It says EB, ending balance 63018,
Okay, ending balance 680.
right in the middle of the page, starting on the
We're talking
left.
about page W2.
Yep. Under US Bank, there's 190,000 in principal.
Okay, right at the very first row.
Yep. And then the two MPWATs that we haven't been able to pay off, 117,394.76 is the principal balance on that.
Gotcha.
And the second one is 18,427.27. So you have a total, if you go to the right on that same line, of 325,822.03 in principal that's still outstanding.
Okay, and what portion of these monies are now held in reserve?
All of this will be paid by, all of your debt will be paid by the reserve. It's 100% reserved from that.
Okay, and will there be any balance in the reserve?
There should be a little bit, and I believe it
Okay,
will end up having to close back to the reserve fund, but this has to stay until the debt is paid.
okay, okay. All right, and again, just to reiterate this, when this loan was taken out, it was set up that it couldn't be paid off early without getting specific permission to do it. And
Some,
that's what
yeah,
that's
some
what
will
we're
allow
seeking.
you, they allowed us to do 3
Yeah,
from the Mass Pollution Abatement Trust Group, but the US Bank one, they said no. And that's to protect their investors
sure,
who
right, right.
anticipated collecting a certain amount of money, and so they lose if they allow you to pay off early.
Okay, and this 190 from US Bank, what's the retirement date on that? Did you happen to know that?
I don't know it off the top of my head.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
Yep. Page W3, I know, apologize for it being small, but I wanted to get it all on one page. The first column that says fiscal 2017, that's, when I came in, that's what your balance sheet looked like. There have been a number of conversations that I've had with the Department of Revenue about what you can and cannot have within an enterprise fund. And I also had conversations with the auditor. So just in this one, all the columns to the right of that grade line are for fiscal 2018, which just ended. So your water enterprise fund is the first column. There are 2 columns that have been added. The betterment committed interest refunds and the debt payment, which we just talked about, having the money reserved for debt payments. Those were originally in a carry-forward article in the general fund. In talking with the auditor, he wanted me to put them into the enterprise fund area, but I didn't want to confuse everyone here because that's completely reserved money that you can't touch. That's why I've given them 2 separate numbers. But according to the Department of Revenue, later when we talk about how they calculate free cash, your retained earnings, they'll do that total water enterprise fund column, and they back out certain numbers. The other thing that the state asked me to do is move out items that were considered capital into a capital project fund. They don't belong in the enterprise fund. If you're under construction, there were 2 articles that had been reserved previously that are now in special funds. One is the Burlingame Loop, and the other is 169 Water Design. So they've actually got separate funds as well. But they won't be playing into any role of retained earnings.
Now, if those projects are done,
You can close them out, tell
Yes.
me you want to close them out, and they close back to your enterprise fund.
After we close them out?
Yep,
And that's just a written request
to keep them separated.
to close them out?
Oh, yeah, just a written request that you're done with the project or whatever.
Okay.
Donna, where did
Yeah.
those funds come from? Or where do these funds and these balances originate from?
So they were in, the two on the right there that said Burlingame Loop and Route 169
Okay.
water design, in 2017, they would have been considered part of your fund balance reserve for continuing appropriations.
They must have come from town meeting warrant articles, where they were funded from. We'd have to find the article
Right.
to find where it
Right.
came from.
On a school loop, I don't recall us appropriating any money for that.
The Burlingame Road School Loop? This is,
I'm sorry, you're
This is
right. I'm
Burlingame
thinking
Road.
of the other school loop. As
Right.
far as Burlingame,
that's why I asked if we wanted to close these out, because I believe the Burlingame
It's
Road
done.
School Loop is done, as
Yeah.
well as the Route 169 water main design is
which
done as
we
well.
never went
Yeah.
through with.
Okay.
Yeah, the money,
Yeah.
I think 160-something thousand was originally appropriated, or 120
Yeah,
or something.
so when that kind of stuff happens, you guys need to let the accountant know that you're done and you're not going to do the project so they can close it. We don't know what exact projects you're working on and where the status is unless
Maybe, Mr.
someone
Chairman, we
tells
could
us.
think about closing that out tonight.
I think, sure, a motion would be fine. I think that'd be great.
I'd like to make a motion to close those two accounts.
Second.
The 169 and the Burlingame School Loop.
Okay, any
Second.
discussion on making that motion? No, it's Jen? Nothing? Well, in that case, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay? So we'll go on to page W4, which is the retained earning calculation. I gave you both the one they did last year and the one that they just did. The first number, you can see where they take the cash account, 322,636, and they do round. And this year, if you go under the total water enterprise funds, which does include those two refunds and debt payments, 1,218,470. However, when they do their deductions, they always deduct if there's a warrants payable, which means usually the last, we call it the July 15th warrant, but it's the last fiscal year warrant, because it doesn't hit cash until July, it hits as a warrants payable. The same thing could be with accrued payroll. If the payroll is actually paid in the first week of July, but it's for the prior year, it's called an accrued payroll and doesn't hit cash. They will deduct those numbers from that cash number when they're doing their calculation.
If I may interrupt, Donald, but what about anticipated receipts?
No, they will not.
They won't look at that?
No,
Okay.
no. And they will also take out certain fund balances. Now, they're become very stringent on what is allowed as a fund balance. So I've listed the types of fund balances that you can have, but they do deduct it. So even though the number is in your total cash for that debt repayment and the betterment committed interest refunds, they do get deducted out. So it's not part of your retained earnings certification, because they are reserved for a specific purpose.
And Donna, just so
Yeah.
that, if I may, Mr. Chairman,
Okay.
just so that, for clarity, at least from my point of view, is these subtractions, when we were told in years past about our retained earnings balance, would it have been done exactly this way?
That's my understanding, is that's how they done. They now give us an actual detail sheet to show us. So I have the detail sheet from this year and last year that I've received.
Okay.
And this is exactly how they've calculated it.
Okay, and I understand that as far as prior years,
One of the issues that they had is you had the fixed assets and the debt buried within the balance sheet, and they were having a real tough time getting the numbers. That's why they had me pull them out. It's not clear to them when you start putting all this extra numbers in. But this is exactly how they calculate it, yeah.
Can you explain the retained earnings and where that money sits?
So it's not a bank account. A lot of people think it's a bank account. It's not. It's a determination by the state of your liquidity. And so in some senses, this is what you have not, money that we don't feel that you have reserved or earmarked for anything that would be available to spend. It closes every year, and they start from scratch and take your number and subtract any fund balances. But if you look at your fund balance that's at the very bottom, ending undesignated fund balances, that's pretty much the number. It's what's free. And every year you close out, if you have more revenue than what you projected, less expended than what you budgeted, that affects that number, is ultimately what happens.
You're still on page W4, correct?
Yep.
Donna?
Yeah.
Okay, so, and you're saying is that unadjusted retained earnings for fiscal ending 7/1/18.
Yep.
It's 260,000,
Yes,
233.
yep.
Okay. And the, what we just closed out, those two accounts, would that have a bearing on this?
Not on this one, they'll only certify it once a year. So even if you close out now, they won't certify until July 1st, when I submit for July 1st, 2019.
Okay,
So that will increase that number
okay.
Next year.
next year.
All right. And we still haven't transferred that $90,000, have we?
No, that's gonna happen at a special town meeting,
Okay,
because it takes special town meeting to transfer from one
Good enough.
account to another.
Okay.
So,
What is that for?
the RRFA for the water superintendent, I
Oh,
talked to you
yeah.
about going to the sewer salaries account.
Yep,
So
Yeah.
that will show up as sewer retained earnings for next year as well.
Is that on the special or?
Yes.
October.
Yes, I believe it's already in
Yeah.
the warrant article for transfers,
Yeah.
correct? Interdepartmental?
Yep. I do want to note that because you didn't use all of the water superintendent money that came from that fund, I did close it back to the reserve fund so that it's still available for you to use, so it doesn't get lost and it doesn't become part of retained earnings.
So for FY
Perfect,
18, in the
yeah.
budget, it was over $103,000, and you only expended about 50, I
Right,
believe.
yeah.
So instead of, the remaining 50, instead of going to retained earnings, went back into that RRFA account. So
Okay.
it replenished it a
Yeah.
little bit, whatever
And
was
it's
unspent.
reserved for water superintendent.
Little bit.
Okay. And then I just want to bring your attention to W5. There was some questions on the calculation of interest, and I've done a lot of work on this and gone back and done a lot of research, and what I have found is there were bank accounts that the treasurer had that were earmarked as water or sewer. The same is going to apply to both. But the ledger is the one that has been charging the payrolls and the payables through it and making the deductions. The treasurer's office wasn't reducing for warrants and wasn't putting the deposits in those bank accounts consistently for betterments that would be collected. I did question the assistant before she left. Was she aware that that hadn't been taking place, and she was not aware that it even needed to take place? I said, those numbers should match. It's not bank accounts from the treasurer plus what's on the ledger. Those numbers should be identical. And that's what I found happening. One of the reasons they make separate bank accounts historically is because that account deserves to have interest. You do not have to have a bank account in order to allocate the interest. It's a basic calculation. So I've gone with, on July 1st, to do a basic calculation. So I just wanted to show you how that was going to be done, and it's on W5 and W6. This is my sample for July. The cash balance in the water, I circled it, it's $255,920.07 at July 31st. I plug that number in on W6. The interest rate comes from the treasurer. That's the interest rate that you would have earned at the bank. That comes right from her bank account. I divide it by 365 days, and I multiply it by the number of days in the month. So the water will get credited $76.07 of interest for the month of July. And that's the journal entry that I make to credit the interest, allocate the interest to the water. It's a cleaner way of doing it. It's my preference to do it that way because they keep missing, even if you're right trying to stay on top of it, there's so much activity, especially in sewer. There's so much, you have weekly warrants, even now in water, you have weekly payrolls going. So it's a lot of movement of money. This is the better, accurate way of calculating. So that's the sample of how I'm calculating the interest going forward from July 1st. So it's more accurate.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, Donna, the 0.35%, is that current market?
That's the country bank rate of their account. I get that from the treasurer's office. So that was and that'll change every month depending on what the current rate is. I'll take the current rate that they have.
Does the treasurer bundle cash and then go out into the marketplace and try to, I guess, shop for the best rate?
With limitations, the state limitations of what you can invest in, it's pretty limited. It's money market or CD.
Right.
And a little tougher with a CD because you're locking up funds, so it depends on your cash flow. You don't want to get in a situation you have to borrow money to pay. But yeah, that's what she does, is tries to get the best, calculates what she thinks she can tie up. It's usually not more than a 3-month
Right,
CD
but
that they can tie
I'm sure that
up.
rate is higher than 0.35%.
Not much, but you have a lot of activity, so I'm going with the money market rate.
On some of our accounts, we have a lot of activity, and now with the monies that are coming in from ExxonMobil, we have funds that will have little or no activity in the near future, between 3 and 6 months.
What money from ExxonMobil are you talking about?
The distribution that was given out back in, I think it was last May or June.
So you're talking about that $8 million
Right, yeah.
settlement?
Yeah.
That is not in the water or sewer account. That's in a receipt reserve, and it's not entitled to have interest. That's
Not
general.
entitled to have.
It's general fund interest.
So
It
the
actually took state approval to get it even segregated into a separate fund, but it's not, it cannot earn interest. It has to go to the general fund. So it does earn interest, but it can't stay in the fund. It has to go to the general fund.
So the general fund earns the interest.
Correct.
Okay, and we don't get any credit for that.
No.
Does that seem right to you?
Knowing the law,
No, the rules, I guess?
the rules,
Yeah.
yes. That's just how it is. It's very hard, very limited. There's very few accounts that are allowed to actually maintain interest within there.
Okay.
Trust funds, yes, but pretty much everything else, has to be stated in the law that allows it.
The trust funds is yes.
They get to keep it
Okay.
in their fund.
Okay. What would happen if we created a trust fund and put that money in
You
the
don't
trust
have,
fund?
because you already had, what would have happened normally, that settlement should have gone into the general fund. Had Robin not requested it be set aside in a receipt reserve and not approved by the state,
Yeah.
that would have all gone into the general fund.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Okay. And on W7 and W8, I just wanted to show you the budget and the indirect costs. And you can kind of tie the numbers back and forth. The indirect costs are contained within column that says FY19. But you can kind of go back and see, oh yeah, I see some of these are direct costs, so don't get confused. I put a section of numbers when we were doing the budget with Peter of numbers that I knew that were direct meaning it's charged directly to the enterprise fund. One of them, the first one you see here is general insurance, $1,534. Health insurance, the $17,452. Those are direct costs. Indirect is the next box down, $20,219. It's under indirect expenses, $20,219, and it's made up of the numbers listed below. The very last one that says related benefits, of $170, $158, the related benefit section's in the bottom box of how it's calculated to the $170, $158. This formula was established before I came here, so I've just continued using what was already in practice.
Excuse me, Don, actually, I think the formula was just changed last year, just before you came. Because before, the formula was based on, heavily on outstanding debt. They took that into consideration. But now what they've done is we're getting a portion, the percentage of the actual costs.
Correct. That's the way it was when I came in last year. This is the
Yeah,
formula
yeah,
that was in
yeah.
place.
So the outstanding debt has been paid off, that's why it's not part of our budget.
Well, actually, because the outstanding debt has been paid off, that if they didn't change it, our indirect costs would be much, much lower. So that's why they changed it, to increase the cost of our indirect debt, our indirect costs. They did was they shifted the wind.
Well, this is the formula that was in
This is
play
what-
for 17,
again, I hear you,
18,
Don.
19,
Yep,
okay.
yep, thank you.
Yep. Okay, if you want to take a look at sewer, it's, you've got the same sheets for sewer. First one is your fixed assets. Second one is the debt, and if you want, I can email Peter with the retirement dates of all the debt.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Don, if I may, can we go back to,
Yeah.
can we go back to water just for a second?
Yeah.
On the assets.
Yeah,
And these assets that are listed here, these are assets based on the cost of the projects that we put into place. But this is not the total of the assets, because it doesn't take into consideration going back to our IMA agreement to where all of the infrastructure in the town is now Charlton Water and Sewer property. So should we, what's the advantage of having higher assets or lower assets?
more, I think it comes into play when you go to borrow.
Okay,
They'll look at your finances and
Yeah.
see what your assets are.
okay. Because it is about, again, it's multiple tens of millions of dollars higher because of all of the additional assets. And then obviously with what they're putting in the ground now, which, when we look at the two projects, I mean, it's gonna be huge. The assets would be over 40 million. So,
Yeah.
okay, good enough. Thank you.
Okay. So the S2 has the debt. That's ending balances at 6/30/18, that's your principal balances. And I'll get you the retirement dates. Same here, the outer column is what we get as a subsidy from Mass Pollution Abatement Trust.
And Donna, that also has a retirement date as well.
Yep, those are attached to those, actually on on sewer, it's all of them. On water, it was not US Bank, but,
Okay. Just for the commissioners, this retirement date here from the state, this is the reason why we can't have the sun set on our obligation to maintain and repair the pumps. Once this has been retired, then we have the ability to do that. As long as this is in place, we cannot make the claim that we're no longer going to be responsible for the operation of all of those pumps that people have in their yards. Thank you, Don.
Yep. So S3 is the same kind of format as we had with the water. So we had some changes there as well. 2017 is the first column. That's how you ended last June. There were some items that were required to be moved. There was Millennium Cash and Cash Capital Improvement, which I went back quite a ways, and I'm not sure where those accounts have come from, but they are on the treasurer's side as trust funds. So I have moved them from enterprise, and they're in trust funds. You can see them on the right. They should not be part of your enterprise fund. You cannot have fund, the lines I highlighted there in gray down below, those are fund balance reserve for Millennium and fund balance reserve for capital. Those items cannot have, they're not approved fund balances for enterprise funds. So in order for me to deal with that, I did have to move them into a trust fund. And they do earn interest as a trust fund, so that's outside of the calculation. They're invested with the trust funds.
Donna, that cash capital improvement,
Yep,
where is that money? That
in
970?
a trust fund.
It's in a trust fund. What
Yep.
is it for?
I'd be damned if I know. I haven't found any paperwork on it that describes how it got created or why it's
So-
there.
Could that be where the privilege fees are going to be set aside to pay down that debt?
No, from what I can see, it's been there for a while and it's been given interest. What I would suggest, though, where you're thinking of creating a stabilization fund for water and for sewer for future capital projects, is to move that money into your stabilization.
Does this affect our retained earnings?
No, because it's now been moved out, and they did subtract it out last year.
So our retained earnings, so this is above and beyond our retained earnings?
Correct.
Okay. So that would be a separate warrant article?
Could be part of the same stabilization one. It's just when you do the motion, transfer from these two into that stabilization, and then it's all in
So you transfer from
one.
retained earnings a set amount and also from this?
Yeah. I do want to say something on the stabilization, just so that we're all aware of it. You can have stabilization for water and for sewer. If it is funded from retained earnings, however you word the use of that special stabilization fund for water and sewer, be careful how you word it, make sure it's loose enough for you. If it's going to be for capital improvements, that's fine, because it locks in to whatever that is. Unlike the general fund that town meeting can change, town meeting cannot change the use of that water and sewer. However you word it is how it's going to be. If you fund it from anything other than like retained earnings or funds that belong to sewer, say you did a transfer from taxation in, that has to be kept and tracked separately, and that portion can be changed by town meeting. But it has to be tracked in and out separately. So I suggest you just use water or sewer to do your stabilization. I think if you were to end up, if you ever have it coming from a different source, then we should create a separate fund for it so you can track in and out separately so that you're abiding by the regulations.
If I may, so, Donna, if I hear what you're saying is, once a account is classified as stabilization, and that stabilization fund, when it was created, would have specific language that the funds cannot be used for anything other than that specific language.
Right.
You think that's the reason why, for all these years, water and sewer doesn't have a stabilization fund?
I don't think so, because I think for the most part, what you want to do is do capital projects with it. I think that's a loose enough wording for it. If you wanted to use it for salaries or operations, then you wouldn't be able to.
Okay.
But we could keep a portion in retained earnings, and that would be a
Correct.
buffer for that?
Right.
Correct?
Right.
Got it.
And then if you look at S4, that's the retained earnings certification. I gave you what they did last year and what they just did this year. They take the cash balance in sewer enterprise, and then they subtract out if there's any warrants payable or accrued payroll or any fund balances that are reserved. And they get to your retained earnings amount. Does not take in any future revenue. It cuts off on June 30th, and it's every June 30th they do this liquidity look.
So Don, is it safe to say that our revenues exceeded our expenditures by $186,000 based on this?
It could have been expenditures turned back, or revenues
Right, I
over,
understand, but-
either way.
Just use general numbers.
Yeah.
Not realizing we didn't spend every line item to the end, it's,
Right,
we collected approximately $186,000 more, $196,000
Yeah.
more
yeah.
than what we spent.
Also, Donna, if
So that's
I may,
about 10% of our budget.
I'm sorry, Peter, I thought you were
Yes,
finished.
sir. No, I was,
All set?
yep.
So the unadjusted retained earnings as of fiscal 2019, which is July 1, 2018, I see the 802,952. Just using round numbers, that $90,000 we have to come back into sewer, that would make the retained earnings, by adding 90,000 to it, would make it approximately 892,000.
It would, except it will not get certified again until next
okay.
July 1st.
That's okay.
Yeah,
Okay, because we know that the money that we're transferring, it's real and very good.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay, the same thing on S5 and S6 about the calculation of interest. Take the cash balance on July 31st. I plug that into the formula using the same rate, 0.35%, divided by 365 days times the number of days in the month, and you would be credited with $414.95.
Don, if we were to create a stabilization account and transfer retained earnings into that, would that affect this balance?
Yes,
And we cannot collect interest on stabilization?
yes, you will. It's a trust fund, so you're just gonna be earning your interest over in the
And that
stabilization.
will just stay, that'll just,
It'll stay in that stabilization
okay.
fund and grow.
all right, thank you. So if we're not gonna expend money from the stabilization account, we could, is there any other options to invest that differently, because it's gonna be sitting there for 6 months or 9 months at a time? until town
I
meeting
think
approves
that's
this?
something that you can talk with the treasurer about. I know that they work with Bartholomew as an investment, the brokers.
Okay.
So yes, I would say yes. If you can give her an idea of when it would be spent, then she could do a better investment with it.
If I may ask, Donna,
Yep.
I remember, I don't know whether it was in the treasurer's office or the accounting office, but there are periods of time to where we have vast swings as far as our cash balance because of when the bills go out and when those funds come in versus when we have large payments that are due for debt service. So if we were to move monies out of retained earnings, I guess we would need some guidance as far as how much we could safely move to make sure we have balances to cover those
Correct.
indebtednesses. Okay.
Yeah.
And Donna, had any of our accounts been receiving interest?
So, yes, they have been receiving interest, and those two that I moved
Yep.
to trust actually were receiving interest as trust. They just were not on the accounting as trust funds. So
Okay.
I now match the treasurer on those. But yes, they've all been receiving interest. It's just the calculation of your regular sewer enterprise, because of those swings like that.
Right.
and nothing was being moved. This is the more accurate calculation, but you're gonna see that interest go up and down as your collections, where you are in the collection process.
Got it.
And then same thing on S7 and S8, your indirect cost in your budget, same formula that water had was applied to sewer as well.
Donna, on the direct costs, I don't
Yeah.
recall in the past seeing these things. They might have been hidden in a more general heading, but workman's comp,
Yep,
is that new?
it was probably just under general insurance.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
okay.
I was trying to itemize it so that we
Which
can
is
see
fine.
it better.
Yeah, again, it certainly gives a better viewpoint of
Yeah.
exactly what's going on and what it's for. So the column on the far right, that's the apportionment to the sewer.
Yes,
Okay.
yep. Now, this is all I brought for tonight, but we are still working with Matt Abrams on, I'm just going to call it the mother file because it's enormous. We had him create an Excel spreadsheet of all of your betterments and privilege fees and where they stand, what's still outstanding, and how we can roll the information right from Vadar into that file. We're actually meeting again with him on Thursday. It's been something we've been working on with the assessor, myself. Peter's been at a few of the meetings. It's been a whole year of ongoing of really trying to understand where everything is, so when I have that finalized, I'll share that with Peter and he can share that with you. It's more detailed. What you see here is like a summary shot. This is in detail of what's out there. Because the Vadar software doesn't distinguish between a privilege fee and a betterment is one of the issues. And as soon as you have a privilege fee that is, because typically privilege fees are paid up front once, and you can identify those easily by putting them in a separate GL account. When the Vadar system puts it over to period of time for collection, then it's in a betterment category. That's how the utility bills it. So then it becomes difficult to separate what's betterment, what's privilege fees, because they're both being paid over a time frame. So we do have them, we have them by phases. It's really a lot of work that went into it. I'm appreciative of all the work Matt put into it, but we will all share it, and it'll be maintained with the assessor and the collector. But Peter and I will both end up having access to it so that we can see it and share it.
Donna, when someone pays off a betterment up front, or when a house is sold, that money gets put in, does that show up as retained earnings, or is that put into a separate GL that
So,
does not?
well, that's a good question. One of the things that I had done, let's see if I can, because I wanted to make sure that there was enough money being reserved. So if you look at your sewer, there's a total of $4 million, $4,258,701.34, S2. And same thing applies to water. There's $4,258,701.34 is what's owed in principal for the debt. Do you everybody see that total amount? If I take the amount of unapportioned betterments, which is 3,112,780.87, and that's from S3, page S3. It's the unapportioned, that means that's the amount that hasn't been billed yet on a tax bill. That's future to be collected for betterments. And I subtract that from what's debt is due, then you will find that that's the amount of money that's under fund balance reserve for debt service.
It's underfunded.
It's under fund balance reserve for debt service. So I've reserved it so that you can pay the principal, so it doesn't become part of your retained earnings. It's reserved.
So you have that reserve.
So it does change every year. That was the one I really had to dig hard for this year to figure out how can I get to that, and thus we started with Matt trying to identify.
So we have enough funds set aside to pay all the debt that is currently,
Principal,
all the principal.
all the principal. The interest is, a moving target, because if you paid early, if they allowed you to prepay it, it's not due yet, so you're not allowed to betterment the interest portion. That's the committed interest, is supposed to kind of match it as you're going along, but.
Donna, if I may here, this is from memory. Phase 3 of our improvement down at the treatment plant, I think ended up coming in under budget, like 28229. And those monies were not actually bettered. Those monies, there was a assumption of privilege fees would be paying for that. And one particular large customer was going to be paying, I think it's $1.7 million of that. So we had a deficit about 1.2, and the anticipation was that that was going to be paid for by new development privilege fees. For me, the question has always been is, what amount is out there that we don't have covered?
You're covered.
We're covered.
You're covered, that's why I reserved it.
Okay.
You're covered on the principal portion,
For the principal portion.
right.
But if it's stretched out, you get interest.
You got interest, so you got the interest of how soon you pay off, and you've got the interest of, interest is a moving target. So somebody comes in and they pay their betterment off early, you're not gonna get the committed interest. But the debt, when you go to borrow, the debt is based, the principal is based on your expense.
Oh, correct. It's just like any debt. If you
Right.
pay your car off early,
Right.
then you're not paying the interest you would have paid for all those months.
Right.
And that's the same thing
Yeah.
here.
I think I could reserve what's left remaining of interest for the remaining time of the bond issue, but I'm not sure that you'd want to do that. That really would lower your retained earnings. I don't think you need to do that.
What it would
I'd
do
see
is-
it more as
Right.
as an operating expense. It's,
Okay. What you're saying is, with the privilege fees that have been charged, assigned, or, there's another word for it, but we're at a point now is the X and Y have met,
right,
so we're on the other side.
right,
Okay, that's good news.
yeah. That's why I put it as a fund balance reserve for that debt. That's the difference between what you owe, what hasn't been billed yet on the betterments, and that's now been set aside, and you have a positive retained earnings, so that means you're good.
Okay.
And the mother file that's being created shows those privilege fees adding up to just about the same amount as that Phase 3
Yeah.
project was.
Yeah.
Okay,
He has those separated as privilege fees.
very good.
Okay, I'm not trying to rush anybody, but we are running a bit behind, and
Okay.
by a bit, I mean quite a bit.
Sorry.
No.
I don't have much to see you, and I wanted to make sure that you had everything.
Peter or Rob or anybody else got any questions for Donna before she leaves?
Just a comment is very worthwhile as far as, we apologize for running a little bit over here, but this is information that we certainly needed to hear, and we'll be looking forward to that additional information, Donna.
Yes, I'll send it through Peter, the dates and stuff of when you're gonna retire your debt.
Okay, and maybe we could think about commissioners as having this as either an annual or biannual event. Again, because we're getting it right from the old saying, the horse's mouth here,
Yeah.
as far as where we are and where we're going and what's there and what's not there.
Okay.
All right,
Thank you
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
so much.
Thank you, Don.
Next on the agenda, we have Chris McClure from McClure Engineering. Chris, I thank you for being patient.
Sure. So I have a few things to go through. I don't know if your next meeting, not that I want to prolong this any longer, but I don't know what the next meeting
Yeah,
is, or does it matter? Or I could be nice and offer it up, or I could,
Look legal first, is that what you're
Yeah.
saying?
That would be, great. I only need 5 minutes, really.
perfect.
Oh, okay.
Even less. Just
Then we'll welcome,
kind of let everybody know what's going on.
That's being overly optimistic, man.
Well, I appreciate that, thank you very much.
Sure, no problem.
Just quickly, and thank you for seeing me tonight. I came to you guys probably a couple of years ago now, and asked about my tying into the sewer line over on, is it North Sturbridge Road?
Getting an extension to go to Curtis Hill.
Right. And I was reading in the paper, I don't know, about a month and a half ago, where the town had actually taken those lines, where before the commission had told me it was private. So I called Peter and I asked if, you guys would be willing to talk to me about tying in now. And so that's why I'm here. I just wanted to kind of get a feeling, before I spend a whole lot of time looking to tie in and looking for ways to get down the hill and tie into that maybe a little bit easier. I wanted to make sure that the commission was kind of okay with that, I guess is where
So,
I'm going more.
Mr. Chair, I believe the previous discussion was, Mr. Blair has anticipated 73 or 75 house subdivision on the old Castigian farm up off the end of Curtis Hill Road. That property comes down, and actually it has some frontage on North Sturbridge Road that is further down on our gravity line. So the discussion I had with Mr. Blair is if he wanted to possibly connect to that line on North Sturbridge Road, it'd probably be in his best interest to connect on the gravity line, not on those pressure lines that are there. And he said it because he owns property on both sides of those railroad tracks, he could bore under the tracks and connect to those lines. Very kind of preliminary discussion, and just if it's something the board wants to kind of talk about, and I can look into it further, and we can try and find out, again, if Mr. Blair's desire is there, and if we can make it work, then that's great. If not, if the board doesn't have the interest to do so, then we can do that.
This land is up by the solar panels?
Yes. I have kind of a little, show it to you. This is my land up here, but, this would be the most productive way for me to tie in. This is Fetch, is it Fetch Hill Road?
Fitzgerald?
Fitzgerald, yeah, this sewer line, the gravity line starts, apparently, and then it comes this way. Here's the solar farm that's up there, and then
Is that Freight House Road or?
I'm sorry, Freight House.
There you go.
Okay,
Yeah,
it's like, wow,
sorry.
we're miles away from where I thought it was. Okay. So this is Freight House Road, this is North Sturbridge Road.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
There's quite a grade there, I'm sure. Quite a grade there?
We found the flattest spot. Over here, where I own on both sides of the tracks, it's a cliff.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
okay.
a literal cliff. But I own to here, in this area, I'd need an easement from this gentleman here. I've gotta look it up on the assessors, who it is, and just approach him and see if he'd be willing. If not, I'd come down the road, from Curtis Hill Road down, with a pressure line of my own. It's 73, it's proposed, it's gonna be proposed for 73 houses, as Peter said. And,
Why a pressure line?
well, because it would be a lot easier to run down the street. rather than a gravity line. You've gotta be pretty precise with those, to get it all the way from Curtis Hill all the way down.
He's talking about, when you said pressure, you're talking about your alternative
My
route to go out
alternative,
to
yeah.
Route 31 and come all the way around. Not this route he's anticipating to be gravity.
This would be gravity, correct.
What's your anticipated timing for?
Well,
Thoughts on that?
depending on how fast we get through the, depending how fast we get through the planning board, I would say probably 2020, maybe starting to build homes.
Individual ones?
Yes, residential street.
What is the line on North Sturbridge, is that a 10-inch, 12-inch?
I'd have to look up, I don't know.
Okay.
Believe it's an 8.
You think it's an 8?
If this is gonna be considered, the request is for, if we're using Title V, or, excuse me, if we're using the 200 gallons per home, we're at 14.6.
Yes,
Does that put us into the over 10,000 gallon request?
yes.
Okay, so
And under the moratorium?
under the moratorium.
Yes, but that's at the commission's discretion,
Okay.
to take it
that's
on a
just another
case-by-case
consideration.
basis. Yes.
Yeah.
Because the moratorium is in place, again, I believe it says in the moratorium that you can take that case-by-case to.
Yeah, I
to
believe
do
you're
that.
correct.
Has anybody talked to Viola? I have talked to, John, yes, and his initial response and why he was against it last time is because he was going off the table for daily ammonia loadings. That has since been increased after we did the headworks analysis, and Ty and Bond has given him the different, pounds per day for ammonia that we're currently not.
So our permit's been increased?
No. The design plan that John was using showed, I forget the amount of gallons, the amount of pounds per day of ammonia. John thought we were at 110% of our, capacity.
Yeah.
It's it's just related to our, design, not the NIPD's permit. And John, now since we did the headworks analysis, we sat down with, Ty and Bond, we're using a different daily loading for ammonia, so we're only at 60% of what plant design is. So I did talk to John about this quick. I haven't asked him for anything formally yet. I wanted to see what your interest was. And if it's not a dead no right now, I'll continue to move forward, talk to John, talk to Clea. We'll try and get a better plan together to show what the possibilities are and just start kicking the can down the road. I put a copy of what our bylaws currently has in it for sewer line extensions. And it's pretty, I believe it's consistent. I believe it has everything we need to protect ourselves there.
Whereabouts are you, Chief?
It's under our 7:30 appointment.
You stopped at page 14, because at page 15, 16, and 18, it's another report you incorporated in there, so I don't know if you have a complete set of bylaws in there, Peter.
I didn't have a complete set, no, I just tried to take out the part that had to do with the extensions, the Article 3.
I understand that.
There's a couple more pages.
There's a couple pages in there, I think, that I don't think you meant to include in there, no? 16, 17, and 18?
I don't have,
Okay.
I have 20 and 21.
All right.
I don't follow what pages you're talking about.
I'm looking at it electronically.
Okay, so I have, this is the Melanson, the pages out of the Melanson report?
Yep. You
Yeah.
meant, put, okay.
I meant to put those in there for you, because that's what the recommendations were coming out of the Melanson Heath report, is that the commission adopt these two checklists, which we haven't done yet, because we haven't had any extensions come in front of us, so I put those in there just so you can review them and, discuss adopting them if we decide to move forward. That's why, so I have that one page from the Melanson Heath report that has his recommendations from the report, and also the checklist that he recommends the commission adopt. Just more for informational purposes only, so that you guys can, if you're starting to consider this, you can just look at what's there, look what came out of the Melanson Heath report, and I can start working with Mr. Blair to kind of put something a little, maybe a little more formal, together to put in front of you, and I'll talk to John Oley from Veolia, see what, get his, I guess, concerns, and we can go from there.
Originally, the first time around, was this proposed in roughly the same fashion, tying in at the same spot? And
No, I believe he was discussing tying into the 2-inch force main at that time.
okay.
Actually, my recollection was asking if there was any way the sewer could get from here to there, or from either Route 31 or North Sturbridge Road up to Curtis Hill. I believe that was,
Okay.
correct me, Cleve, if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I was just looking for a way to tie into the sewer line,
Yeah,
and I didn't realize, I thought it was all gravity there, I didn't know that that was
Okay.
possible.
So, again, I mentioned to Mr. Blair that if it does move forward, past practice has been an $8,200 betterment per EDU or per house, and that'll be a fee that he'll be responsible for.
$598,000. Wow. Not wow, 73 houses
Yeah,
times
that's
an average of 400 grand. Wow. So it's, see that, either you got them or you don't have them.
That's correct. And put septics in,
That's right.
for a lot of money.
Again, just a little bit of direction from the board. I don't know if I need a formal motion, but again, if it's not a dead no at this point, I'll continue to just start putting stuff together for you to consider.
Well, I'd definitely like to hear more about, tying into the plant and making sure that, the 8-inch line can handle it in the fashion that you're looking for, you're proposing to tie into. And I guess that's my first initial thoughts.
And also the question of the added weight, what's that gonna do to our plant?
All right? Great.
Great.
As long as Mr. Blair realizes that the commission still has to approve that over 10,000. Because we
Yes.
would take the position, it's not 10,000 to cut off right now, let's wait and see what happens, or just go forward with the whole enchilada. So it's, could be possibly, if we're gonna go forward, it could be 50 houses by right, is what you would have. And then the additional 23 would be by the approval of the commission. Do I have that pretty much?
Yeah, I think he could do that without our permission for 50 houses.
Yeah.
Just on a side note, would you know if it's gonna be flexible or conventional subdivision at this point in time, or is
It's
it too
open
early?
space, it's open space.
So it's flexible?
Flexible, yeah.
So you'd have a phasing plan in place and,
Oh, correct, yeah,
yep.
yeah.
So you'd be able to build X number of houses the first year, so many the second, fourth, fifth.
73 houses, I mean, it's gonna take probably a good 4 years anyway, 4 to 5 years to build out anyway. Even in a
You're
good
on
market.
at least a 5-year plan with the phasing on that.
Probably.
What's it, 10 or 12 a year is the maximum?
It's like 20% the first year, I believe,
Okay,
and then
okay.
a certain number afterwards, but I think you're on a 5-year plus plan.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
but just so people don't, sitting around at home, don't say, oh my goodness, 75 houses all at once. It's not the way it works,
I wouldn't,
so.
yeah, the market wouldn't take that anyway.
No,
Yeah.
when you can't do it under your flexible subdivision plan.
Right.
So,
If you go back 10 years and then add those 10 years and say absorption rate of X amount of houses, you know, and, you know, it could actually happen, I doubt it, but, you know, within a year or two.
Yeah.
Because of the pent-up demand.
Well, I see it in my sales in the other towns, it's just, you know, in Charlton, I just built out all the lots that I had real fast, so the sales are really good right now. They were really bad for a long time,
Yeah.
but they're good right now.
Well, I think you're a step closer than you were 2 or 3 years ago when you came here, so
Yes.
we've got some, I guess I want to speak to John Oakley as well and get his take on it, because very important. I mean, some of our decisions about what the sewer plant can handle don't bear as much weight as the guy running the plant, of course, so I'd be anxious to hear what he has to say about it,
And how it impacts the pump station.
so. We all set with Cleveland? Anybody else?
Thank you for your time. Appreciate
Sure,
it.
hope
Thank
A
you.
little bit helpful to you.
Thank you again. Appreciate it.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Oh, Mr. McClure, you're the last one here, so you gotta be next.
Save the best for last. I was waiting to say that. So Chris McClure, McClure Engineering. I probably stand for most of this presentation, if you don't mind. But you have a memo from Peter regarding the discussion items. So I'd like to just go through them. The first one we want to talk about is the Route 169 pump station. The finished, basically it's just decisions on what it's gonna look like. And I didn't wanna make the I've been in front of you before, probably a year ago, based upon, what the options were. But I don't want you folks driving down 169 every day saying, that mob building looks like, well, Kelly Green is more like it. So this is the exterior. And we had made some adjustments based upon, roof pitches, and, windows for, they're gonna be fake windows, but just for the purpose of, they can kind of fit into that area. And I have a condensed package, this was larger, but really, again, I don't want to, I'm just be happier if the commission made, their recommendations on these colors and on the finishes, so.
We're talking externally?
Does anyone have one that has it? Oh, mine's already there. Good. All right.
Don't have a color printer?
Maybe
Maybe you can see Peter, but come down
The
to our
package
place.
is, the
At least
package
we
is
have
color, you don't need
Look
color
at
on the
this,
front.
look at this, right here,
Yeah.
thanks, Peter.
This is from him.
That's
He has
from him.
color. Yeah.
Why is he missing color?
Well,
You haven't chosen the colors yet.
Here we
You
go,
have to tell
here
them
we
what
go.
colors to use.
Exactly.
What happened to the gable in the roof?
Well, you were the one that suggested, I believe, I have to go back to the meeting minutes, that.
I think there was a gable.
There was not a
That was
gable in that
spoken.
roof. I could be wrong, I'm not saying, I would have to review that, but, you had made that recommendation to get that pitch up a little bit, steeper on the roof.
Is this whole thing I'm sorry, Chairman, can I speak? This is a package building?
It is a package building. So, if we look at, basically at page 3, and it's the finished schedule, there's gonna be a stucco from the roof line down, which would be a brick, depending upon what color we want.
Is it stucco or is it brick, Chris?
It's a concrete building, but it's a textured surface.
So
It won't be brick.
It's like stamped?
Yes, exactly, yeah.
Yuck.
So we can start with the roof. I think that we just, again, we don't want to have too much conversation about it, but there are some colors that aren't available. Whether it's a brown, and typically these pump stations are, somewhat neutral colors, brown, muted. And if it's the bark wood or the weathered wood, or you wanted charcoal, it really makes no difference to me. Maybe I'm giving you too many options here, so. But I think what we had once discussed, and if I look at we had two things we were trying to mirror. One was your sewer pump stations, which really don't have much of a continuity. And then we have the pump station down on Route 20 in Oxford, which is basically sided, vinyl sided, with a brown roof and white PVC trim. And then we have, well, basically this would be, I think you have one on Route 20 next to the old BT Coffee, but it was a flat roof. So, I guess my recommendation here would need to be to go with a gray or a brown shingle for the roof. Okay,
I guess what's the commission's wishes? How involved do you want to be on picking colors for the pump station?
Well, first of all, this would be the largest building that we have in town, as far as the water system goes, correct?
yes, it will be, yes.
So it's not an 8x8 pump station or pump pit.
No, it's gonna be a considerable size building. You'll be, everybody will be able to see it that double down 169.
I know, maybe Russ, I don't know if you have experience with stucco in New England?
No, stay away from it.
Pretty much after 20 years, there's a problem with lifting and water getting behind it. That's what I see as a problem. If we're gonna have to go with a concrete building, then I think we should site it rather than stucco it.
Is that an option?
Oh, sure. Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, the table, it's wide open.
Okay.
Typically pump stations, they like to look like brick, but we could definitely decide.
You do hardy board?
On the exterior, well, right now, the exterior, I guess when we look at the siding is a certainty vinyl siding.
I'd rather see stucco than vinyl. Vinyl has such a short life compared to stucco.
I don't know, I don't necessarily agree with that.
Pump stations, I agree with it.
You could always take the concrete building and strap it, and we could put hardy board on it.
Good.
Well, I can obviously see if that's an option. I mean, I can find out tomorrow if that's what you want. So you want something, it's hardy board, it's what is like a,
Well, it'll look
Decking.
like clapboard, but it's,
Okay.
but it's a masonry product.
okay.
In fact, it's on Teddy's. I believe Teddy's built the hardy board. Yeah, it looks like vinyl, it's not fine, well, actually, it looks like clapboard. It has the grooves in it.
It's individual boards, Chris.
Okay,
They're concrete boards.
sure,
It's like the door rock you put on the floor,
yeah.
comes factory paint.
And they mount it right to they attach it right to concrete product, obviously.
They usually strap it.
I don't see why I couldn't.
I can ask. Yeah.
That's the question.
Okay.
I'd prefer that over the stucco myself.
Is it gonna be a wood frame or a metal frame?
It's concrete.
It's kinda like the
only
back of a
framing
truck.
on it is a roof.
Okay, no, I had originally pictured like cement blocks with, a texture on the outside, which can be rather decorative, and a metal roof. It doesn't seem to be anything like
No, it
that.
comes in three pieces, and then they'll just put
Okay.
together like a septic tank almost.
Yep.
It's the same premise, it's a precast concrete block, basically.
Or when they're pouring the foundation, they can create the foundation with a brick shelf and put real bricks.
Yeah.
Because it's gonna come and they're gonna put it on the foundation. Everyone's just gonna measure right. In fact, I've seen L bracket steel bolted into concrete and then the bricks being shelved that way.
Hardy board, you said?
Yeah, hardy,
Yeah,
hardy board, hardy plank. Have you ever seen hardy board?
Hardy boys, you said? Used to be my favorite,
Oh, come on, I had a crush on them.
Okay, so,
Certainty, I'm sure Certainty makes one as well.
sure, okay. And as far as the color on that siding? On that, yeah, siding, board. The 4-inch clapboard that we're looking at, but ideally those, just the colors, that are available there.
Yeah, once you get into the hardy board, you're gonna have, maybe it's gonna be the 5 or 6 inch exposure.
Exposed, yeah.
anyways.
Yeah.
I think Peter has pretty good taste. I would defer to him on colors.
I'll second that.
Okay, so I mean, really what I wanted to get here is that, again, I mean, through Peter and I, if we just had the, you know, the finish, it's nothing gonna be, I mean, everything's gonna be fairly muted and, gonna look decent. You know, the door, you know, door paint, any interest in anything like that, now's the time to say it. I just don't want to get.
For architectural shingles?
Yeah, that's what they show,
Yeah.
Are they
25 or 30 year.
25's too low? Yeah.
It says this, North America's #1 selling shingle, Timberline.
Is it JF?
Well, it says here GIF, so.
Yeah, I think Timberland's JF. But I mean,
Okay, so white PVC, white trim, the door, the exterior door would be the floor, of course, is just gonna do with a sixth grade, just a gray floor in there. And, what else did I have here to ask?
Want a red building?
Intake, the intake
red
louvers.
brick?
Said red. It's not brick.
Can be brick.
And we did get a change out on the, roll-up door on the exterior, so that, maintenance on that pump skid would be facilitated much easier with that roll-up on that side.
The roll-up door's insulated?
The roll-up door is not insulated.
It's not insulated, it has no insulation whatsoever.
Well, let me see.
I mean, the better garage doors today are, what are they, R10 or R12?
Yeah, but not those. He's talking about
We're
We're talking about
Yeah.
self-coiling.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes. Let's see, galvanized, everything available.
Room's gonna stay pretty hot with those pumps running. I don't know how much insulation you want in there.
Need the ventilation.
I'll pose that question.
Okay. Yeah, I think you're right there.
So we don't need a motion about Pete and Chris's decisions on the finish. We're all gonna be
Not Chris,
happy no matter
Pete.
what happens.
I'm not taking responsibility, I am not falling for that.
I'm not falling for
I
that.
am not falling for that.
But we will, Jen made a motion, I seconded it.
Fair enough. All in favor?
Aye.
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 That's right,
You
Pete.
really did make a
Moving
motion, I
on.
heard her say it, but I didn't understand what it was for. Is that a real motion on the floor? Done, yeah.
Okay, moving right along. Action item number 2 would be Carpenter Hill Road and the sinkholes. I color coded this too, Rob. Scared no expense.
Always makes it
That's why we pay you the big bucks.
That's right.
a large piece of paper.
So, I guess we're just gonna revisit the, this topic. There had been some sinkholes, developing along the, Carpenter Hill Road in the areas of the, in the area of the sewer extension. And specifically in the areas where these clay dams were installed to prevent migration of water down the sewer lines. And what you can see here is, and they're a little bit small, but if you look, well, let's start from left to right. So the first dam that was installed, they put a relief pipe behind the dam. That relief pipe, depending upon the slope of the road, either carried to the next dam, or it exited, or it basically terminated to daylight. So if you look at the first dam to the second dam, there was a T that was located at the second dam. that because of the overall pitch of the road, didn't exit a daylight on the side of the road. It got picked up, and where the road level dropped off, they just maintained a positive pitch, and you can see where I go from blue to pink. Blue to pink is where the pipe exited, terminated, discharge onto the surface. Well, Carpenter Hill Road, you have that big field which started to get turned over time. Basically, that country swale that was there just filled in with dirt, and thus the discharge pipe was plugged. That plugging action prevented the water from migrating out of the relief behind the clay dam, and that created a sponging action, that additional water in there, and that's where that sinkhole developed. Okay, so the water ponded up, continued traffic motion, pushed the sediment, the silt out of there, and created that sinkhole. Okay, so the pink is where there are no pipes. In discussion with the highway department, obviously, is if we were to connect these pipes and carry the discharge down to the catch basin, which is further down the road by the Kozlowski's farm there, then you wouldn't worry about these pipes getting plugged up again, which is the logical thing to do, because unless, of course, they're going to continue to maintain those country swales. Now you're probably aware that they are plowing and growing in those fields. So again, every year they're creating more silt. You know by the way that the wind blows, they put up the snow fences there. Basically there are no longer swales. It's just level. The dirt is level with the side of the road. So this would be the appropriate solution for what has occurred there.
So Chris, when you were out there in the spring, you found these relief drains.
We did find a relief drains.
So throughout the summer, they're flowing again.
Throughout, if, actually, the groundwater table wasn't that high, but yeah, I would assume, I haven't been out there to look, but yeah, I would assume even now, they're probably that table only gets that high probably in the springtime, yeah.
But they're still open to daylight.
They are open to daylight,
For now.
so.
And your recommendation for a permanent fix is to tie them together and run them all the way down to a catch basin that's existing.
Yeah, that way we wouldn't have this, issue.
And you talked to Jerry about that?
I did.
And how long is that, 700 feet?
Well, we have the 222, we have the 346.
About 1,000 feet, just about.
Yeah, it's probably, 322, 346. Another 100 on top of that to get to that catch basin. So 300, 600, 700 feet, 800 feet, say.
Jerry has said he'd be willing to work with us and maybe install that for us if that's the direction you want to go. I have not asked him to give us an estimated cost on that.
What's currently in there for pipes for the drains?
It is, they're 6-inch drain pipes, SDR 35, so.
Okay.
Question, Chris, on this design here, I see there's a total of 4 clay dams, correct?
Yes,
Okay, and those clay dams go from the surface all the way down to and below the actual sewer pipe?
they do, and they're actually, if you look on this, the next page is, on page 202, there's 2 additional. So there was six installed overall, and I believe
Okay.
the overall, length of sewer on this road was about 1,700 and some odd feet. so.
Okay, and if I can recall correctly, if I look at the cross-section design of a sewer pipe, usually go a few inches below, and then what do they set, stone, then put the sewer pipe on stone,
Yes,
then backfill with stone again?
yes,
Okay, so what the clay dam is doing is, it's actually taking that stone to where groundwater could pass, and it's blocking it.
that's exactly right.
So that groundwater, especially when you get down to the third one here, because of the pressure of up above, it could be, you're actually gathering the groundwater and you're bringing it up to the surface. In other words, if we look at the third one,
Yeah, so
and we
let's
look at
take,
the elevation.
let's take a look at that first sinkhole have developed.
Yeah,
So when we, the end of the blue, color, you see that's where the pipe exited to daylight in that country swale.
right, yeah, right at the midpoint of
Yes.
that grade.
Exactly, so, so that's where that water was plugged and it, you know, that created that, you know, this issue that we're having here.
So that, it makes sense, that was obviously the largest flow, because that's where it can escape. But actually, these clay barriers are stopping the surface, the subsurface water up above from flowing through the stone.
Yeah, so what it's doing is, if you have that much water movement through, you would potentially see that whole trench start to,
Sure,
start to,
and that's what the clay barrier is supposed to do, though, prevent
yes,
that.
exactly. But the relief isn't there, so basically what we did was put that relief in initially, and then took that relief away.
And the proposal is to start this subsurface relief pipe right at the third clay barrier coming down the hill?
It would be to pick it up where the blue and the, so we have that.
Further up?
Yeah, we have that, where the blue and the pink come together, so the pink
Station
would be
800?
proposed,
No,
replacement.
station
of the water
600.
line.
My
Station.
glasses
Yes,
fail you,
yep,
yeah.
5 plus, yep, exactly.
5+.
Yep.
So wherever that pipe daylighted, we cut it back a little bit, pick it up, and then just carry that pitch right down the edge of the, right below the edge of the swale, and,
And you want to carry that all the way down to the catch basin in the street?
yes.
That's on the next page at
Yeah, that's my,
Station
handy part
1200?
right there, exactly,
1250?
yeah.
Um,
And we're not talking about a lot of water, mind you, this isn't surface runoff, this just happens to be water that's getting picked up in the
Underground.
groundwater that's getting picked up in the drain, so we're not talking about, you know, introducing a bunch of water, it's just gonna, it doesn't take much for what happened here to happen, it just needs to relieve that groundwater.
So it's not, because of the volume is low, there's not gonna be a lot of speed there? Or at least because with the volume lower, then the speed isn't a concern?
I don't expect that I have to do an evaluation of, you know, my big thing is just looking at that catch basin and the sump, I would not be doing an evaluation, hydraulic evaluation on that, because it's just groundwater that I'm taking out of the equation.
Has the road gotten worse, or have there been any more sinkholes since that was opened up?
No, the road hasn't gotten any worse.
Okay, because one of the options is, let's make sure we have that cleaned out and wait and see. That would be an option, wouldn't it?
You could certainly do that, it's just a matter of, you know, maintaining that,
Okay.
you know, through the seasons.
Gonna be our job or a highway's job?
Well, it's a sewer pipe relief, so I don't know if you'd have
Yeah,
to
but
have
it's-
that discussion with them.
It's just a relief, you know, I mean, we don't, you know, go up and down the roads checking things like that, but the highway department does.
Obviously, we want to work with the highway department. All the
Yeah.
thing is, you know, if we put,
No, just,
first of all, this is way over the warranty time.
Yeah.
Okay, so, the entity that is being serviced by this line it has no effect on them. The contractor, he did everything right in
Yeah.
the period of time is over. And what we've got is, we've got a highway department being left with, this issue, and it wouldn't be here unless the sewer line was put in. So, I guess we're kind of.
Typically, do you see these
culpable.
Ts at the, more towards the bottom of the clay dam than the top for the relief?
So the T that we found, it's interesting, because the T that we found, just so happened to, you know, catch that other pipe. That was the only T that we found in, you know, we're talking about that at the second check dam. That was the only interconnection we saw between the system, because they just couldn't catch gravity at the time. We typically would
would see it a little bit lower, but each of these, so we haven't, you know, we uncovered the end of pipes, we just didn't go back to, physically go back to see how deep it was, you know, I was
Okay.
basically using Jerry's guy with a backhoe and saying, find this for me, and 18 inches below is where we found this. You know, the sewer pipe isn't all that deep there, but it's just enough to drop it out, but ideally you would figure to be at the toe of that clay dam. But again, if the thing is,
It would prevent that sogging issue from ever happening.
yeah, exactly, it would prevent it, and we know that this event just started, so we're assuming that those pipes have been opened up for a good portion of time, because it has been 7 years, and then eventually, literally, there is no swill there, and I think it probably wouldn't, because Kozlowski didn't always rent that field out for corn, it was just a fallow field for a number of years, so that swale would obviously be in better shape if you don't have the dirt blowing over, but now it's basically filled in with silt.
How much grade is adjacent to those, where those lines discharge? Is it simple as saying, okay, we do a dry well right at the end of them, or is the soil not even
Yeah, I mean,
conducive to do that up there?
The key there is,
Becomes
whether
a maintenance
somebody-
issue.
It's maintenance, yeah, whether someone's to drive off the side of the road there, or when they're plowing, you know, I'm assuming it's, there is doesn't like to have a very deep grade in those country swales out through there, because someone gets stuck and you have to pull them out of there. Right now, they're pretty much level with the side of the road, we actually had to physically dig them out, but when we were putting the sewer line in, I remember that there was a visible swale there, whether it was 18 inches or 24 inches, it's just the water flow down that side of it as you're working on it, so. So it's just a matter of what would be, you know, maybe like Rob says, we put some stakes in there so they know they're there and they're maintained and ensure that it solves a problem, or you go ahead and try and bid this out and see what it's gonna cost to have it done, and again, I think Jerry would assist in that, but 1,000 feet of drain pipe is, you know, it's maybe something a little bit more than he wants to get involved with. I have no idea. It's not, I mean, it's probably would get done in a day, but
It's easy to say to get done in the day, but that's
yeah,
a lot of
right,
work.
depending upon what it is, so. We could definitely just, put some wooden stakes in there, I mean, the road has been marked out now, we know where they are. We'll be able to find them again, it's just to see, we can monitor them when they start to flow.
Chris, couple questions. What's the average depth of the sewer line?
This area through here is, about, I would say they're about 4.5 feet here.
All right, are they in the gutter of the road, or are they under
The
the
sewer
pavement?
line's in the pavement, and
It's
pretty
in the
much
pavement.
try to keep it in the middle of the road as much as possible. Yeah.
Okay, so then these relief pipes came from the middle of the road, and they vent out to the side,
Yes, yeah,
to the gutter?
into the swale there.
And the gutter would be on the Charlton side rather than the Sturbridge side of the road?
Exactly, left side going up.
All right, so this whole thing is gonna live and die by what's between the middle of the road and off to the side, because that has gotta work, otherwise you're digging the road up. Because right now, are we talking about just digging the road up, or digging up the side
No,
of the?
just
the
the
swale.
Just the swale.
Yeah.
And making, because each, when I say EOP, each of those end of pipes are visible on the swale. So what I'm talking about is picking up that end, putting a coupling on it, bringing it down to the next one,
Okay.
in either a 90 or a T, whatever it is, and then just continuing that flowage so it doesn't get caught up in that.
And then covering it.
And then covering it, yeah, basically, then you go right back to where it is right now, it's all covered up.
What depth would you think it would have to be? 2 feet down?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's
So
just
they're not plowing it up.
Exactly, yeah, I mean, it's gonna flow, I don't see it flowing in the winter, it's gonna flow in the spring. see drain pipe in below a foot, you know, 18 inches is moving water. I don't think it's gonna ice out.
Yeah, oh, no, I'm saying
Yeah.
just 2 feet up there if it was farmer's field and
Sure.
they're gonna be plowing it,
Yeah, exactly.
so.
That's when I
part of
do
the
see him
problem.
pulling out, now he pulls his silage out in areas that I've never seen coming out of that field before. So that would be, needed to be something to shore up, or they need to protect that, because, you know, he's pulling his silage out. He's not always coming down to the entrance next to the barn now. He's, if his truck can get over that hump on the road, he's doing it.
The sinkholes haven't been fixed at this point in time, right? Just
They've been filled
temporarily
and
patched.
they've been temporarily patched, but they're happy with that repair as of now. So they're not asking us to dig the road up and do anything further.
I think we need to investigate it some more, get some budget numbers as far as doing the work. And then once we have a clear scope of what needs to be done, and
Yeah.
how many feet of pipe and how many cleanouts, and then go from there. I think we just can't forget about it, because, like I said, one of the things you can do is, I think the highway uses that yellow paint or orange paint for where they mark catch basins. Because these points to where these pipes come out definitely should be marked on the asphalt
Yes.
as permanent markers, so that we can find these things.
Well, I definitely would think that if Jerry was willing to help us out on this and to explore
Yep.
the cost of that.
Again,
Just
Jerry's out right now. I know
Sure.
he does have, this is in his plans to do, he has time to do it in the fall, so I'll ask him for a cost associated with it, and then you can decide if it's the route you wanna go.
Perfect.
Good. Good. And then, again, if he needs assistance from private contractors, then we would budget
Yes.
that number and go from there.
Exactly.
Next. Okay, so this is the tricky item, and this is gonna be, there will be some ambiguity in my statements. But I will say that I did have a good conversation, with Mary Ju Pigsley, and she is the, so this discussion is relative to the Buried Corner Road water line funding, and the discussion regarding oversight and the budget and what happens with the money, whatever's left over, and that type of talk that you've had with Peter that he asked me to explore. We're all aware of the discussion topic.
Okay, so, cut to the chase, this is the original budget item of $200,000 that was first bridged as far as the inspection side for the town of Charlton, and then it was reduced to $20,000.
Yes.
And now that it came in under budget by about $1.5 million, then again, the original 200,000 was reduced, so it would stay under the 10 million. But now that it's under 10 million, then can we get our inspection back, I believe was the question.
And I also think there was a component regarding whether or not the town had put into any of that
From the bond bill,
from the bond bill.
$1 million
And-
from the bond bill.
Okay, yeah.
So in discussion with Mary Ju Pigsley, she said she's not 100%, she'd be happy to look into it if there were questions that arose from the commission. The DEP, their main component was the enforcement component and the public safety component. There are other folks working on the funding component here. So, the consent order that was signed off is the mechanism that describes the funding appropriation. So it's always gonna go back to the consent order. And the way that the consent order is written, there are two parties that are responsible for the funding. One is the Southbridge through Casella, and the other is Mass DEP as acting upon on behalf of the Commonwealth. So if, it's not set up for anybody else to get any money back, okay?
But the funding was not set up to where Charlton was contributing.
No, now, let's discuss that. So, her belief, and is pretty certain about that, that the money did get appropriated through the mechanism of an environmental bond bill, but it wasn't specific, it wasn't, that money wasn't appropriated to Charlton and taken away and put towards this. It was through that environmental bond bill. It was never appropriated anywhere else. So that would be the source that would be half a beneficiary, whatever would be left, right? That and the Southbridge component. So I think that there might have been some confusion there. She said she'd look into that, but she was fairly certain that that's where that money came from.
If I'm not mistaken, Chris, the original environmental bond bill was like $500 million.
Right, exactly.
Okay, and out of that, I think we got tagged on with, was it 6 million? Was the original amount?
From what I heard, yes.
No, it was 6 million, it was, okay.
Again, I wasn't here when that happened,
No,
so
it was $6
from what
million.
I've heard, yes, the original
The
amount
$6
was
million
$6 million.
was to go for,
To find our own public water
to
supply.
find our own public water. You know, not to put pipes in up at Berry Corner Road. And the thing is because of the situation is when it came in front of us, as I recall, is that there wasn't enough funds in, that, we're talking about Charlton residents who were impacted, so it was kind of bridged that maybe this would be appropriate to use those funds if in fact it went over their budget of the $10 million. And that's what I was always understood as.
So, my understanding in that discussion was, so the environmental bond bill was out there for a lot of different reasons, a lot of different resources to pay for a lot of different things. They didn't say Charlton was allocated 6 million for this, so we're gonna go in there
Oh, no,
and
Chris,
use that
I'm
up.
sorry for interrupting, but no, they did. They did. It was specific. There was a news release, the whole thing.
So,
I'll find it.
yes,
Not
so,
right now,
so,
but I'll
so,
find it.
she did say that if further clarification was needed, that, she said that, you know, you look back at what the order says, but, it was, the funding source was the environmental bond bill, not anything specific to, Charlton, and therefore, you wouldn't, if there was money to be had, it's going back into that, and if Charlton has a need for that, whatever that is, then you would just go about looking for those resources the same way you would prior to this project. That's what was told to me.
My recollection is that this was a joint deal, and I believe Casella had nothing to do with it as far as in name and in the front. But the Southbridge was coming up with 4 million. They ended up taking $1 million out of what was set aside for us from the 6 down to 5, and the other 5 million was coming from the state. Thus, the $10 million budget. So, and again, I go back to the fact of the original plan was, we were gonna have 100% inspection on that job, and the budget number for that was $200,000. So as these talks were going back and forth, that the preliminary numbers came in, it was gonna be over $10 million, and they were in I guess, a little bit of a tailspin to say, all right, how do we go and cut this number down? So they did some value engineering and said, or at least, I believe it was Ms. Craver said, oh, we can take that 200,000 and move it down to 20. All right, and I know that that was discussed here at an open meeting. And we knew that you can't do that inspection if you're doing 100% for $200,000. So when it came in under budget, we said, well, fine, then let's go back to the original plan of, let us do our 100% inspection, so we know exactly what's there and where it is. So,
Now I can speak to that item if you want. So just go back to the consent order, so it says, but the Commonwealth's total contribution toward all such costs will not exceed $5 million, and that's basically where she's saying that was all appropriated through them for this project, through the Commonwealth, through however they allocated it. But again,
so
she
Chris,
can
can we
get that
get the,
specific.
can they come up with the $5 million? Because if they can, then the 200,000 for inspection is there.
So,
Because what are we gonna do? We're gonna give the discount to Casella?
So based upon our understanding, there are two properties that are on the hook, so to speak, for payment. So therefore, any distribution of any additional funds would be back to those two parties. So let's talk about the oversight. So there are line items that are in this project that are associated with that. So during the initial steps, stages, the funding was, everybody was doing their part to ensure that this project came in at, under $10 million. Okay, so there are repayment items, and if they could be considered requested for additional costs for reimbursement for the oversight, just like a change order would be in this in this type of project. The town should keep track of it. If there is excess funds, if there's no funds left and this thing goes to the point where they can't finish it for that much money, there's gonna be no disbursement of additional funds out. They'll stop. There's alternates on this, on the project, so those would be restricted. Of course, you just have to restrict to what you can do within the budget that you had. So her recommendation would be to keep track of the costs, and upon completion, there would be time to discuss those additional costs incurred by the town relative to oversight. I did explain that you do have an administrator that's on site doing oversight that you weren't expecting to have. He's out there to protect the town and the interests of the town, but, and I don't know where, I wasn't privy to where those funds are coming in to pay for that oversight, but she said that keep track of them. They seem to be reasonable to her, and that if there was excess in there where you could get that money back, then that would be a line item for discussion.
If I may, I'm gonna digress here for a second. I was reading a report on Berry Corner,
Yes.
and the backfilling of the water line is not with stone. Do you know that?
The bedding of the
The bedding,
the water
backfilling,
line.
the initial protection around the line,
is with sand.
it's with sand?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Originally they discussed stone, but it's
Well, actually,
with
what they're
sand.
using is they're not using sand. They're using the, I think that stuff from Lane,
Stone dust?
stone dust.
You don't want stone around a water main, though.
But they're using stone dust.
Shouldn't make a difference.
I don't know, I'm asking, I'm not an engineer, does it
No,
make a difference?
and I'll tell you, during the initial stages of that, tie and bond, this is self-supporting ductile iron pipe. Tie and bond's spec typically doesn't even call for a bedding of the pipe at all. And we were pretty adamant that they needed to do
Sure.
that, and we didn't want to use, stone was in any bedding material needed, i.e. when you were putting the pipe near ledge or rock,
Yep.
then used stone, and because that was the item they had, we said, no, you need to use sand and use it for all the bedding.
Yep.
But in talking with the engineers, the design engineers at, we're Tie and Bond, right, Tie and Bond, that it's a self-supporting pipe, they don't, and they sometimes put it in without any bedding. But it does have bedding.
Well, yeah, the installer who wants to save money will put it in with no bedding.
Right.
Okay, but the inspector is supposed to say, whoa, stop, this is what the spec says.
Right.
You gotta do the spec.
That's exactly
All right, so
what's
does
being.
our spec say, or the spec that was agreed upon, does it say stone dust or does it say sand?
We don't really call for a spec on the sand, it's just gotta be a, you know, sand, I mean, Mass DOT spec on sand, but they're not out there looking
So
at
does
the.
that meet the spec, what they're using?
It does, yeah,
I mean,
the
is
bedding.
it loosey-goosey meet it or it doesn't meet it?
No, it's bedding
Because the
material.
only point I'm making, Chris, is that, for me, that's a gray area.
Right.
And again, I know we've got a responsible inspector out there.
Yeah.
But he's not a PE. And the thing is our original agreement is that we would have a PE or at least a PE coming on the site either once a day or 3 times a week with an assistant there to make sure all these things are being done. And we sacrifice those dollars. So if in fact the budget is coming in at 85% of the total amount, then we should be able to get relief from the sacrifice we made to make this project work in the beginning. And, I mean, at a bare minimum, you know, we've got dollars coming back based on that percentage of what's being put in, because the state's already into it for $5 million. And then Southbridge and Charlton are into it for 4 and 1. So, if in fact that came in 1.5 million less, then figure out the percentage, and that's what we got coming back. So if in fact, let's keep the numbers easy, if it came in 2 million under budget, then the percentage of 2 million over 5 is 2/5, and we split that. So it's 1/5 each.
I think the biggest thing to remember is they want, you know, we need to see this project through, and
I don't disagree
then
with
once that's through and they're insured, because no one at this point in time can say they got 9,000 feet and they still got 6 to go. They've started to struggle, you know, that now they're hitting the rock that's slowing them down at 40 feet a day. So you know, they've got to make sure they can do it within the budget.
Yeah,
No
and
one
I'm
knows
sure
that
2 weeks
yet.
from now, they'll hit the nice soft spot, and they'll do 250 feet a day. So,
She just said that realistically, if you need some more information, she'd be happy to provide it. But until which time that project is done and they know exactly what the costs are, everybody's still holding their breath that this thing's gonna go through for that.
So when it comes down to oversight
Yes,
and reimbursement for that,
yes.
she was amenable to that.
She said she would, she said certainly keep track of it, and she would certainly ask the questions and get the answers that are needed for that. She didn't
So
sound
would
like it was
that
unreasonable.
so would that more than likely be a reimbursement at the end of the project when all the numbers are final? We track what we have for time from our employee for being on site, all those hours, and then we submit one bill for all that time?
Yeah,
And ask for reimbursement?
I'd almost keep it up, going on an ongoing basis now that we've finally been able to get this and say this is where we're into it right now. And, we'd like this consideration as soon as possible, because you are putting money out every day, obviously, if you have an employee there every day.
just a little hypothetical of what's going forward here. If this comes in at $9 million, the state has committed 5 to it. Does that commitment then drop from 5 down to 4.5? Because that's their half, and then the other half belongs to the other 2 entities, which is Southbridge and Charlton? Or does it come in to where the state has budgeted $5 million for it, and the project went on, it was well over the $5 million, they write the check out for 5, and then we end up picking up the balance? Because what's the lady's name?
Mary Jude,
Mary Jude.
yes.
All right, because she's the one who's gonna make this decision. And the question to Mary Jude is the state, no matter what, is contributing $5 million to this. So they're gonna come in the room and drop down 5 large, and then the remainder's gonna be picked up by the other 2 entities.
There's only 2 entities, so just
We're-
so
we're
everyone's
not an
clear,
entity.
there's only 2 paying entities
We're
in this.
providing the $1 million that's coming out of our funds dedicated from the state.
We're not an entity.
No, there's only two paying entities in this agreement.
And who was the first one?
The first one is the Commonwealth of Massachusetts,
I
acting
understand
through
that.
and by the DEP. The other one was, the Southbridge Town Council approval to borrow funds sufficient to pay costs of water lines not provided through the project receive funds from the Commonwealth and account, which amount shall not exceed $5 million. So it's just two entities. That's what she wants you to be clear about, there's only two entities. So if there's any money left, it can only get dispersed back to those two entities.
So when you say the 5 million, 1 million of that
Actually,
is
it's 4 and 1.
That's right.
It's 4 and 1 that's coming from the state, because they took the other one out of the fund. So again, like I said, the original plan was always to have sufficient and proper inspection.
So the question is, if they're gonna drop down to 4 million, not the 5, right?
Yep.
Before they start to go into anything that was appropriated, Charlton.
All right, so to be clear, what we're saying here is the second party, other than the state, is coming up with $5 million, period.
Well,
Not to
yeah.
exceed 5 million.
Right.
Yeah, not to exceed, exactly, this is just exactly that. It's it. So, I don't think that, she could not tell me, and I can't tell you, that, she's saying that that money was allocated by was secured by the state. If you need to know exactly where it came from, then more investigation needs to be done. It was not, when I told her the position, the discussion that we've had here about that, she's like, no, it wasn't. Somebody didn't go over and say, you had 6 million over here, we're taking it from you to put it over here. So that's, I mean, that, it wasn't her belief that that's what occurred, so.
And they're not gonna discuss who's gonna get what reimbursed till the project is finalized and they have a final cost.
That's the bottom line.
Which is fine.
So
But
until
we gotta
then,
be
we-
ready, though.
we
have to
won't
be
know.
ready to have a discussion.
We're tracking Steve monthly anyways on his expenses.
Oh, yeah,
His
that's true.
hours, yes, Steve is tracking his hours on this job, as well as what he's doing at the pump station, and what he'll be doing at the school.
So it'd be a good idea to make folks know, knowing of that level of effort that's being put forth on behalf of the commission, and that, again, will always be part of the record there.
So unfortunately, I don't think we're gonna be able to come to a conclusion on this until the project is finalized and get the final dollar, know who's spending what, and who's not gonna be responsible for spending their full allotment.
Well, I think we can also ask the more in-depth question of where the money's coming from on the state's portion of the 5
Yes.
million.
Yes.
To be sure of. If it bills out at 9 million, one party not to exceed 5 million pays their 5 million. The state's portion from the state and not the 1 million from the 6 million of our money never enters the equation.
That'd be great if that's the way they shared it.
Well,
Yeah, well,
in order
Or
for
the state
Charlton to
may be
be
able to
left whole from a situation not due to their responsibility, that's the direction that it
There's a,
ideally goes
yeah.
in, but
just
We don't
as
live in
much as I
ideal
hear the other side of that.
Sure.
She was pretty adamant saying, that, I don't think right now, there's no way to say one way or another. And she's like, if you need that information, then find that out. I mean, I can help you find it out, but.
I think the bigger question is to know what we're actually asking for and why. And until we know that we have a public water supply that we actually need to fund, there may be other ways that they can make us whole than trying to get it back from this project. So I think to try and split hairs and maybe just push some buttons that might not help us in the future, I think we may want to just sit back, make sure what we're looking for to do for a public water supply is sufficient, and we're actually gonna take that step forward, and we need that funding. And when that happens, we can ask for the 5 million that's left, and maybe ask them for another way to make us whole on the million that might have been taken from there in the future. So it's kinda,
well, I'm not thinking I'm pushing any buttons with anyone asking legitimate questions as to where the money's
If you
coming
guys are
from.
questioning it,
Just-
if someone thinks one way and someone thinks the other, you wanna get clarity. It's,
Exactly,
Just
we're
clarity,
asking for
yeah.
information.
Yeah.
It's not, nothing's happening, so.
she seemed pretty clear that it wasn't, something that was gonna harm Charlton in any way, shape, or form. It seemed there was a pot of money over in an environmental bond bill that paid for this type of issue.
I ask stupid questions all the time. I don't want people even mad at me for them, so.
I'll
Hey,
jump
we
in.
all set, Chris? That's your last one, right?
I am, yep. Yes.
Up on the hill, the
I think so.
DEP funding and the pump station, so.
3
anybody
items up,
else?
3 items down.
Anybody else, anything for
Thank you
Chris
for
before he
asking.
leaves?
Thank you so much.
Sure. Yeah, no
I'm
problem.
good.
Yeah, we
Good.
got through it. She was happy that, you know, for me to put it out there if that's the question. She doesn't want it to be the elephant in the corner. And, yeah, me and Pete will come up with the nicest looking pump station and, Pete will come up with the nicest looking pump station that you've ever seen.
Purple
Purple, yeah, purple and pink.
spots.
Big happy face.
Thank you, Chris, and good
Kind of
night.
seal on the side of it.
You too.
I think a hip roof would look great on that, but I don't think they can deliver it with a hip roof.
I
How
hope
wide is
not.
the station?
The roof comes in afterwards.
Comes in afterwards.
Yeah, they frame the roof,
Your turn?
just a building, a block building with no roof.
Oh, okay.
Just go.
Hip roofs look nice. They do.
Some structures, there's something that gets sped up.
The pump station.
All right, I'm on.
You're gonna gable.
Thanks, Chris.
Okay, rate study increase, Peter?
Again, as I mentioned in our last meeting, last year about this time, you decided to do a 9% increase on the sewer rates. And in that discussion, you talked about doing a possible another increase this year, whether it was gonna be 9% or 3, 4, 2, 1, whatever that
5.
was gonna be,
We'll
5.
go with 5, yeah.
We're gonna talk about it this year. So I tried to put together some information based on the questions that came up last year. So in here you have our current sewer rates and charges based on that 9% increase last year. Sue put together a sheet of the effects of the possible rate increase for our users, for flat rate and for our metered rate. So at 3% increase, you'll see the difference per quarter based on bedrooms for the 3% and the 9% increase. And for the metered charges, you'll see the difference per quarter based on a 3% and a 9% increase based on usage. I'm gonna say the average 3-bedroom home may use, on the high side, 2,700 cubic feet per quarter. And again, just to reiterate that, prior to last year, there was not a sewer rate increase done since 2008, I believe. So it was 10 years between sewer rates increases. And on the next page, I just put together what the possible increase would do to the surcharges that we're charging 3 of our commercial users based on the strength of their waste.
How have we fared with the 9% increase from last year? We losing ground or gaining
Oh,
ground?
we definitely gained ground. So if you look at what our budget was last year, this year for FY19, I kind of changed the budget around. You were previously carrying like $385,000 in your capital line item. Of that, you weren't really spending all of it or allocating it to do anything. So for FY19, we reduced that to $100,000, which if you look at your expenditure ledger on the following page, last year for FY18, you expended $93,000, I believe, of the 375. So if you take the expenditure ledger out, and you can kind of see what we did. So of these expenses, of the expenses in your budget, the salaries increase annually. The sewer plant operations with the contract with Veolia increase annually. And some of your other fixed costs, such as health insurance and all the other stuff, increase annually. So if you don't do a marginal increase annually, you're going to be falling behind. So I also put together what we billed out for user charges for FY18. It was $1.189 million.
Page you on, Peter?
I
Okay, I
just-
think I just
I don't
got it.
have them-
Yeah.
I don't have the
Okay,
numbers
no,
there. So if you look, this is just user charges
Right.
that we build. So this includes our surcharges and user, it doesn't include any fees or any other betterments or privilege fees. So if
Just, Peter, within the FY '18, where in those quarters did the 9% kick in?
I believe you had the 9% for the,
January, March.
yes, January, March. That 9% increase was only for half of the fiscal year.
We started,
Okay, so our income increased by,
started
10%.
October 1st.
Over your previous year.
But it went out in the first, you didn't see
Yeah,
it until
they were approved in
January,
October, we didn't put them in.
billing wise, but.
right, but actually,
No, I don't think so.
I
So-
thought they went in October.
Do you approve them in October? I don't believe they were.
Right.
didn't get billed till January.
That's,
Right, yeah.
Right,
When I came in, I knew that we were gonna change the prices.
so the new billing was only in effect for 6 months of sewer usage. The January, March, and then
November,
the April,
December.
June, as far as this little spreadsheet you got here, Pete.
Hmm,
And so it increased 10% over the year before.
yes.
But if we had 2 more quarters of increase, then would that 10, sorry, guys, would that 10 go to 20% increase?
I don't believe so.
Well, it would go up.
It would go up, could possibly go up to 13 or 14%,
Right.
depending on what the use, it really depends on what the usage is and the variation of those quarters.
Right,
So, but if you look at the expenditure ledger,
yep,
and if you look at expended for FY '18, you're at 1.789 million is what you expended for that same time period. So your excess for revenues versus what you expended, and again, this doesn't include debt, which is not controlled by either. Your debt is
Right.
paid by benefits and privilege fees, so that's not associated with this. So you're only at approximately less than 10% of what you build out for what you expended. And again, if you look at it's great to see a retained earnings number of $800,000. That increased from 600 the year before. But looking forward to what may need to be done for capital expenditures, for plan upgrades and work that's gonna need to be done, that $800,000 can be wiped out in one project. Or half of that can be gone in one project. Never mind if any big surprises happen with any infrastructure we have in the ground. And that's not included if any repairs need to be done based on the I&I study that's being done. So again, whether you do the 9% increase, it's not something I'm gonna fight for real hard, but I don't wanna see you do a 0% increase and then start falling behind with what you just accomplished last year. So I tried to put together enough, hopefully not too much information, but enough to just give you a good snapshot of what we're collecting, what we've spent, and kind of where our budget is moving forward. So there's not a lot of fluff in our FY '19 budget. I did not use any money from retained earnings to balance it. I tried to balance it just from revenue to cover our expenditures, so if we're within $100,000, we're gonna be within that same 10% threshold. So depending what we're gonna have, you may be able to add to your retained earnings another $100,000 or $150,000, so again, not including what you have for your transfer from the salary stuff, but straight from unspent money, you could increase from 800 to 950. But, again, I think to cover at least your known increases moving forward, you at least wanna do 2 or 3% increase this year moving forward.
I had a little discussion with Pete, guys will entertain me, my weird way of thinking. I had asked Peter if there was a difference, or if there could be a difference between commercial and residential rates. And if there was an increase, potentially, could we increase it on the commercial side and keep residential rates where they're at? I don't know if that's,
Kind of defeats the purpose. Most systems have increases every year. But they're much smaller, but we went 10 years with no increases. That's why we're kind of in the position we are now.
I'm the
I-
new guy here, and that's why I
Yeah.
ask questions.
I wouldn't have a problem with increasing the surcharge fees, because those are usually on a commercial end. Because there's where we're getting our abuse.
You're only sampling 3 of your commercial users. You're not sampling all of them.
Aren't we sampling and surcharging the ones that are of the highest degree?
You're missing your largest user.
We're missing our largest user, okay. Okay, then maybe we should look at that,
I am.
okay?
I am looking at that,
Yeah,
but I'm
yeah.
saying currently, the other way to try and get the commercial to pay more is to do a stepped rate structure like you do with water. So the more you use, the higher the rate goes. But again, I mentioned that to Russ, and Russ brought up a point that to some commercial customers who don't use more than 100 gallons per day, so they're not gonna qualify for that.
Yeah.
If you want to truly have the commercial side pay more. I was reading through the recommendations from the Pioneer Consultant Group report, and one of his recommendations was not to go to a split billing at this time, much like the assessors vote every year not to do a split tax bill for commercial and residential. He recommended we not split that at this time.
Is this
Or at
the
that time.
report from, trying to think of the fellow's name?
Doug Gardner, yes.
Oh, Doug, our boy Doug.
Yes.
Because according to him, we should have retained earnings of 126,000 right now.
Yeah, he was, his
He missed
retained
a
earnings
quarter of
went
an
down.
income, he was out to lunch.
Yeah.
Sorry, but that's what it was. So our retained earnings at 890,000 is where they are.
Your retained earnings right now are 802,000.
Plus the 90,000
Next year.
that we're getting transferred.
Next
Yeah.
fiscal year, that'll
It's
show
money in
up
the bank,
on your
Peter,
retained.
it's
I
there.
understand, but
Yeah,
if
no.
you wanted to use retained earnings to fund anything, there's $802,000 to use
If
right
we're
now.
in a jam, then you use retained earnings.
Correct. Well, again, there's gonna be some capital improvements I think you're gonna wanna do to that treatment plant sooner than later. That's gonna have to
Especially
come
on
from somewhere.
on those 2 tanks that
Yes,
need to get fixed.
the RBCs.
Right.
And
Yeah,
your
yeah,
head,
no, without a doubt.
your headworks building is original to that treatment plant.
Okay.
So there's gonna be some again, not that I just wanna spend everything you have, I think there's some good money to be, there's some good improvements to be had that can make that plant work a lot better for our operator, which will work better for us as well.
You know, I see this done at this table a lot, not while we're here, but how do our rates compare with other towns?
I have not.
No, it's sky high, I'll tell you. We're much higher.
Our sewer
than
rate
other
is sky
towns.
high
Yeah, much higher.
compared to Sturbridge?
How about compared to Auburn?
Maybe compared to Auburn.
Yeah, I mean,
But I think some other surrounding towns are probably on par, some are higher, some are lower.
maybe we should be part of, well, are we having some, what's the study that Abrams is doing?
Water rate,
Water rate, okay. Right.
that's to see if we can be self-sufficient to go consecutive.
Well, maybe, Peter, between, it's your department with Sue, you can make a few phone calls.
We
I'm
can do
curious.
We can check on rates.
Check it, just, let's see where we are, because I hear, well, you know, other towns, this is what they pay, or this is what they charge.
We had those figures about 10, 12 years ago,
Yeah.
and I think they were supplied by Ty and Bond. I'm
Okay.
not sure, but and Charlton was definitely high at that time. But that's a long time ago, so things could have changed.
10 years and no increase.
Yeah.
But we can, I can get those numbers for you.
Right, and without a doubt, our costs are our costs, and that's,
Yeah.
and probably, and we were saying back then, it's, you know, we had an economy to scale. We didn't have the scale because we didn't have that many users. But now that it's getting larger and larger and larger, and especially with, I know it was only for half a year now, with the brewery coming on, which was, again, those things add up. And I think now that we have the good news is that our privilege fees have now covered our indebtedness, that these new privilege fees coming in, for instance, if in fact that builder was allowed to join in, We're looking at $600,000 of funds coming in that could go specifically to improving our system.
Yes, most
And
definitely.
that's what it's for. So, and plus, we also have, and we'll wait for Donna to tell us how much more additional funds we've got coming in from these privilege fees that have been stretched out. For instance, there was a builder over there on Center Depot Road, $115,000. I think it's gonna be over 10 or 20 years, but it's still, those are funds coming in that will go towards projects.
No, those funds are accounted for your improvement, for your phase 3.
They're already counted?
Yes.
Okay, okay.
That's already accounted for to get you up to your 2.8 million or whatever your phase 3
Right.
improvement was. So that's,
Yeah.
we're just about even.
We're just about even.
But again, a big project like what you have to consider tonight is, is it good? Is it more? Yes, it's more. Is it a detriment? I don't believe so. Does it help you move forward and do some good capital improvements that benefit the entire system? Most definitely.
Yeah.
But again, I think that's a small portion, because you can look into that plant, you can talk to the operator, talk to Ty and Bond, and come up with plenty of, and again, not to do improvements, but to do improvements to make that plant run better, and almost, we have to wait until our new NIPD's permit comes out, so we know what, if any of our limits get changed, or there are any other items that we're gonna have to start testing for our discharge limit, because that might totally change what we have planned to do to the plant anyways.
And what's that date?
We don't have a date. It's with a permit writer, that's the most information we could get from the EPA. We haven't seen a draft permit yet to give comments on, so we're just in the holding pattern right now, until we get that draft permit.
I remember Steve talking about it and waiting and waiting and waiting.
Again, so I think it's expired for almost 2 years now, if I'm not mistaken, so. But from what I've been told, it's just, that's the routine they go through. You keep your current status and you hold that until they finally get to it. And it seems like they're getting slower and slower at turning them around, so. It might be another year or two before we get a draft permit and before it goes into effect, another year after that.
I think from a planning point of view, more than likely, there are gonna be some changes that are gonna be costly to us.
Unfortunately, I have to agree.
So you're gonna get some other estimates?
Yes, I'll get some other estimates from what other communities are using in our area to see how we kind of how we stack up against them.
Perfect, thank you.
But there would be no problem if we wanted to not have a split rate, but if we wanted just to change the surcharges.
Correct, I believe you can vote to just change the surcharges if you wanted.
Okay. Okay, and then,
But
also,
I think you're still kind of setting yourself up for a shortfall if you don't at least do a 2.5% increase to cover your fixed costs that are going up annually.
but our fixed costs go up annually, but also our income, goes up annually just because of new users.
No.
So it's our maintenance cost.
I think you can look back and see your fluctuations quarterly are very, there is no trend. So depending on how people decide to conserve or what gets used, it's hard to know. It's a moving target that's not easy to hit as far as revenue.
The wheel is only gonna move 6 or 8%. I mean, all of a sudden, people aren't gonna go and say, look, we really gotta cut down on flushing the toilet. And we're gonna see a drop in our income by 20%. It's not gonna happen. It's pretty,
In FY17, your high quarter was 338 and your low quarter was 223. That's a change of almost 30%.
right, in the high
From
quarter,
quarter to
I'm
quarter.
sure was September to December,
No,
Probably
it's
summer.
July to September.
or
Right.
July to
Yeah.
September, so
But the following year,
you got a
there's
double
no
holiday
trend.
there.
There's no trend, because it's not consistent fiscal year to fiscal year. I looked back till probably 2012, and that trend is not consistent enough to say, okay, you can just carry that forward. So you only have a possible 10% buffer between your revenue and your expenditures. If you lose 2.5% of that to your fixed costs, your Veolia contract is almost half of, probably at least 35 to 40% of what your total budget is. You know that's going up 2.5%.
When's that contract expire?
I I believe you have one more year. So they got one increase coming up in November, and
And how many-
that
how
will be
many
going into their
chances?
third year.
How many extensions are on that, one or two?
I do not know off the top of my head if there are 2 one-year extensions possible, if they want it.
Because they don't bid on it, then we're back in the same boat where,
If they don't want to extend based on
Yeah.
where they're at and it's not being affordable to them, then yes, we have to go out to bid and
Or operate it ourselves,
or operate it
like
ourselves.
what happened 15, 20 years ago. That's scary, huh?
All right.
I think if we're gonna do something, we should do it tonight, and the reason is, we started October 1st with the increased rates last year. And if we're gonna make any other increases this year, I think the people usually get letters before an increase, so they know when it's starting, so they can do what they're gonna do, be it conserve or not conserve or something. I think that's the way we did it last year. We made sure that people were aware in advance of October 1st that that's when we're gonna start with the new rate. And it's already, we've only got one more meeting in September, before October 1st, and if we're gonna get letters out or whatever we've gotta do, I think it should be done tonight.
Actually, Paul, I think we could wait one more meeting now, and
But-
make sure that was buttoned up for next
But do you
meeting.
think we need a letter to everybody before the
No,
starting
I
date?
agree. Yes,
Well,
the starting date is gonna be.
The next meeting is what, September
24th.
24th? That doesn't leave much time to get letters in the mail and,
Wouldn't the letters go out with the bill?
That's what I was just
No,
gonna
the
say.
bills have already gone out.
No, so if this would affect October, November, December billing, the new price?
No, the new price, sorry for interrupting. The new price, again, this should be an annual increase.
Yeah,
So we gotta wait until, what, the January bill?
yeah, because that would be, you'd be covering October, November, December.
Right.
That's correct.
Yeah,
So you wouldn't be billed, so you could send that out.
I take that back. But if I recall, the billing, when we look back at this billing of the new rate, it was the bill, there you go, January and March. So it's the bill that went out January and March.
Yes.
Yeah,
So the rates were changed January 1st to cover that first quarter.
and it would have been the bill for October
You wouldn't
through
get that.
December.
No.
Okay, so that's the
No,
anniversary.
the rate affected January 1st, and it wasn't seen on your bill until that you got until March.
Well,
Okay.
really, I'm a whole quarter
All right,
off
all
and
right,
thinking
all right, so
how much
that's-
you
Yes.
are then.
That's,
Right, so in other words, we gave people a whole quarter notice what the
Yes.
new bill was gonna be.
my,
Yes.
my,
So if
my
Mary's
belief is
at the
we increased
faucet-
it January 1st, and they didn't see it in their bill until March, because it was for January through March. So they didn't see it
Okay.
until April, sorry, when we sent the bill at the beginning of April, for that first quarter of calendar year 18.
So we do have time.
So we do have time.
So we do have time. So all of this-
It'll be 5 quarters either way.
We have some time, so I'll get you that information to see where we stack up against other towns. But again, unfortunately, regardless of where we stack up, I think our budget is still relatively too close to not at least do some type of annual increase. The 9%, yes, could be excessive, but again, to cover your salary, your fixed costs with,
The guy was here last year, he wanted us to go up 27%, 27%.
I know, I'm not him though,
That was a little overreaction, but anyways, sorry, can't let go.
I know.
Yeah.
But again, showing you what we have for our budget, showing you what we collected for revenue, I think it's marginally close, so.
Perfect.
All right. Peter, training.
I approve.
What's that?
I said, I approve of the training.
Perfect. Is that a motion? So, part of the licenses that I had to get to work with my, so for my treatment license and my distribution license, part of that is continuing education for renewal. And there's some trainings coming up in the fall. They seem to run trainings in the fall and in the spring. Winter and summer are marginal, so there's some trainings coming up I'd like to go to. The first 3 are specific to water sewer. The third one is procurement training, that's the most expensive. I don't think that has training contact hours, but it does have good training for procurement, information for chapter 30B to know what's required for us for going out to bid and getting price quotes and all that stuff, so. Again, the first one's for municipal stormwater management. Relates to sewer more so than water, and just what's coming up with the new MS4 stuff and stormwater stuff going on with Mass DEP and the state. Get some training contact hours for there, it's $85. The second one, New England Waterworks is holding a Water Resource and Sustainability Symposium in Devon's, the cost is $60. Mass Waterworks is holding a seminar on topics of interest for water and wastewater utilities, the cost is $50. And again, the procurement training is happening towards the end of the month. It's a 3-day training in Lowell, and the cost is $595. We do have funding in our budget for training. This does fall under that. So it's up to the board if you like any of them more than the others, or if you want.
I'll make a motion, we approve the $790 for training.
I'll second it.
Any more discussion on it?
So each one of these other trainings, Peter, are one day each?
Yes,
Okay, so that's.
full days.
Excuse me?
Full days.
Yeah.
It's a
yeah.
full day training.
Okay, 6 days out of the office.
Yes.
Of these sessions, how many are needed to maintain the current license that we asked you to get?
6. Yeah, at least 2, possibly 3. I believe I need 10 hours of continuing education for my
CEUs?
um,
Yeah.
grade
That's on an
2.
annual basis?
It's semi-annual. It's approved every other year,
Okay,
and it's gonna expire not this year, but next year.
okay, so you could do these next year?
I could,
You could, okay.
but I think, again, most of these are somewhat useful to what we're doing. I think will be beneficial to me in the position, so it's a combination of both, to stay involved, stay in touch with the industry, see what's going on, talk to other superintendents to see what they're facing.
Okay.
Okay, any more discussion? The rest of the motion, well, now, if not, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 This motion was for all of them, right? Okay.
That's correct.
Study hard.
Yep.
Moving on, HVAC system, ductwork cleaning. I believe this was done back, from what I could see in the records, probably 2007, 2008.
Isn't it, we talking the office or everything?
We have two units. The first one is downstairs that covers our office, the lab, and the bathroom. The important thing I think about the downstairs unit is the lab actually has a return that goes into the HVAC system, so depending what they're doing on certain days in there, it kind of gets sucked in and kind of put through the rest of the building, so.
What are you saying? You don't want to be part of it?
I'm just saying, I want, interested to see what's in the ducts, that's all.
You don't want to see it.
Yeah, well,
You just want to clean.
just one, maybe I don't want. And there's a second unit upstairs in Violi's office that's actually inside the treatment plant that, again, has been there for a while. And if you look at the returns, they're all pretty much covered with debris, and some of the inlets have some debris and stuff growing on them as well. So I got 2 quotes from 2 ductwork contractors. It's in there explaining what they're gonna do. The first one is from a company, I believe in Northborough, and their cost is $2,000 for both units. The second quote was from High Tech Environmental from Charlton, and his quote was quite a bit higher at $3,730. They both say they'll clean it, they both say they'll spray antimicrobial, I guess, protectant in there.
You say you had 3 quotes?
I couldn't find anyone else to come give us a
Oh,
quote.
okay, so you've
So
got two then,
this is all yes.
2,000 and 3,700.
Yes.
Recommendations, Peter? Did they accompany their quote with any testimonials?
Scope of work, no, they all kind of have the same pictures on their websites and stuff of what the ductwork's before and after, looks like before and after.
Be curious to talk to some people,
I know.
former customers or customers.
High Tech Environmental came very strongly recommended from Meacham and Charlton, but I'm not sure it's strong enough to justify a $1,700 price difference,
Almost double the price.
unfortunately. I know the gentleman from Pro Air said he's done quite a few municipal jobs for different police stations and fire departments and other treatment facility, water departments, so.
Save the money.
I don't, no, again, I think that they should be cleaned. That's my
Yeah,
opinion.
no, that was my
Yeah,
recommendation.
I'd like to
but-
make a motion to recommend going with the company at the $2,000 rate, as long as you follow it up, Peter, with
I'll ask for some recommendations.
recommendations.
Second.
Any discussion on it? Their method of cleaning is the same, I mean?
Yes, they were consistent with both of them.
Did they
Okay.
actually go in there with a sprayer and spray them and then suck it out?
Afterwards,
And
yes.
Vacuum it?
So they connect, my understanding is they connect a high-flow vacuum to one of the returns, and they put a bristle brush up in there, and they clean up. They do the arms off of the main duct first, and then they go and they clean the main duct work after. It includes spraying down the coils, the heating coil and the AC coil in the heating unit. It seems pretty comprehensive, so.
Sounds good.
And they both seem to do the same thing, and then once it's done, they go in with it and spray like some type of antimicrobial spray to protect it moving forward.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Motion is for the $2,000 company to clean the ductwork. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay. 17A Sunset Drive. During the property transfer, we had a Realtor call and ask us for a final sewer read, which we don't do, but it did alert us to the fact that we told him they weren't on sewer. The seller said they were, so they had a company come out, camera their sewer line, and it went out into the sewer main on the property. So this property has not been receiving a bill, it has been sold, and it is on sewer.
Did the buyers know that there was a problem?
The buyers knew they were on sewer.
Did the buyers know that there was a problem as far
With the
as,
sewer bill,
the
there's
bill?
no, why would they? Their CML probably came back clean.
hold it, how did this begin? Start all over again. Who came, said the broker came?
A Realtor called, asked for a final read on the sewer bill.
Okay, which would mean the property hadn't sold yet.
Correct?
Okay, all right, so then continue.
And we told them it wasn't connected to sewer.
Okay, bingo, flag goes up. So, again, the broker should have told the buyer, there's a problem here.
Okay.
Okay, that's what should have happened. Or that's what, that's what the obligation, the legal obligation of the broker would be to let the potential buyer know this information.
Okay.
Okay, so,
I'm not sure how that relates to what we have.
okay, because what's gonna happen is, as always, is it all boils down to money, is that
Yeah.
we're gonna issue that property owner a bill for past sewerage
Till when?
till, I don't know, however far back as you can go legally.
How are we gonna know?
What do you mean, how you gonna know?
How are we gonna know when they hooked up?
If it's on Sunset Drive?
The extension.
Or I don't know, wherever it's on. But anyways,
But it's on the short, it's not on Sunset Drive waterfront, it's on the back Sunset Drive portion. It's the short road.
okay, okay, all
You
right.
follow?
No, right, over there.
Between,
Where the
yes.
Parkins lived years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a little short one,
Yes.
okay. There has to be some, you have to come to some type of reasonable conclusion.
Doesn't have to be.
They have to what?
Be a reasonable, we're getting a new owner in there. The new owner can start paying the bill as according to, what his usage is.
Yeah,
If it was our error that the other guy didn't pay a bill for however many years it's been, wasn't his fault,
Yeah, ordered this thing.
you know?
or anything?
I understand he could have said, hey,
We have a
you
field
haven't sent me a
card,
bill, but
but nothing that shows, no tie card that shows it was connected. We have no file at all.
No file at all.
No, all we have is the,
Stop
The-
location, that was it.
they have been assessed a betterment.
They have it, okay.
was his house always there, or was it added
Yes.
more recently?
No, I believe the house was there, that's why it was received a
So the
betterment.
betterment must be close to being paid off.
Or it was as part of the transfer, sure,
Yeah, transfer took place how long ago?
maybe a month.
Month. Well, you're surprised that the buyer or the buyer's attorney, based on the broker being obligated to give the information to the buyer, that, look, the sewer department has no record of this being connected. And this is a sizable amount of, let me put it this way, our retained earnings will definitely go up by the time you issue these people a bill. Because what are you gonna do? You're gonna go by, you wouldn't go by title, you'd go by Title V.
Two-bedroom house,
Two-bedroom house, that's $140 a quarter. 140, 280, that's $560 a year. For what? 10 years, that's $5,600. I know if I just bought the building, I wouldn't like getting that bill. And I
Yeah.
think the sewer's been there for 16, 17,
yeah.
getting
So
close
it's
to
been-
20.
Well, you have no idea how long they tied in.
What are you suggesting now, sending the bill to the new owner or to the previous owner?
You're gonna send it to the property, that's what you gotta do.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't believe you can send it to the previous owner, because
No.
you have nothing to.
But he's the one who had the benefit of not paying.
And it could be a legitimate mistake, or it could be someone who kind of
Well, it
cheated.
sounds like somebody just tied in on their own,
Yes.
in the sense of it,
Oh.
and that's.
I thought you said there was a betterment assessed to
Well,
it.
there's a bet,
It was,
but
but
there's a
there was
betterment
no-
assessed to every property that abutted the
Whether
sewer
they
line
tie
at
in or
that
not?
time.
Oh,
Correct.
okay.
The
And-
field
They have a
card
meter.
only shows the sewer,
Would they have a
sewer
meter?
stub.
I don't believe it
So-
has a meter.
No
No, I haven't been in the
construction.
house. I don't
So-
believe it has a meter.
I mean,
Well, if they did it on their own, they certainly weren't gonna put a meter in.
No.
I guess,
So again, it's either, unfortunately, it's one extreme or the other. You either say, okay, the new owner's there, we bill them moving forward and they don't know anything different.
Yeah.
Or if you wanna go, unfortunately, after the previous owner, you have to put that on the back of the new owner, who had nothing to do with it.
I think you had a discussion at a workshop about that exact subject matter. and-
Similar thing.
sounds like the broker's paying for this one.
Good luck.
Broker knew the information.
I think,
'Cause we've-
they need to, you have to have a meter installed. You
Well,
have to have
no,
an
like-
inspection.
You know, if it
Well, right.
change ownership, the
Right.
meter should have to be installed.
Right, but that can happen after the fact. Does that
Well-
usually happen before the fact?
Well, no. but I'm
Depends
saying-
on who it is. Sometimes it
right,
happens
yeah.
before, sometimes it happens after.
Right. So here's what we do know. People live there and use the sewer and never paid a sewer bill, according to the information we hear here right now. Then we know that the broker came to our department and asked to have a final reading, and the broker was told, there's no meter there. All right, and what else was the broker told? That we don't have any record of you being connected?
Yeah.
Okay, so the next question is to the broker, did they convey that to the buyer? And did the buyer convey it to their attorney? Because the attorney, never should have let this thing
I
close.
believe they did.
I think you're asking questions that you're never gonna get a.
How do you know when anybody
get a
tied in?
truthful answer,
Because it is tied in.
so.
Yeah, but how do you know when they tied in?
I don't know, I don't care when they tied it.
Well,
As long
that's,
as they
But
tied
you
in.
can't
that's
go
the
back.
question, but.
Well, then you need to
Bottom
know
line,
when.
You
Well,
can't say I don't care.
Well,
I say
the
going
assumption
forward, we
is
just
they
go home.
tied in
you're
on day
assuming.
one.
That's a big assumption.
Not that big, because again, that's the only way that you're gonna be able to have any leverage here.
Well, I believe the owner that just bought it, the previous owner, if I look at the field card, might have purchased it in 2010. So it could have been tied in before he bought it as well, and he didn't know any different. He was getting his betterment bill and thinking that was his sewer bill. And I'm not trying to make excuses for anybody,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. I think we have a responsibility to look at it from the other side until someone comes forward and explains exactly what happened.
But in the meantime, we just go forward and put a meter in.
Well,
Start
yeah,
billing it.
by all means.
Well, they need an inspection.
Again, I haven't contacted the new property owner at all. I wanted to put in front of you guys and see what your thoughts were. So we definitely move forward and tell them that because the property changed hands, they need to come and purchase a meter and install it.
And given that there was never an inspection done on the property, you have to do some kind of inspection. I mean, who knows how the line was installed?
Are you gonna share the information to the new owner that one or two things happened here? Either this is a huge oversight, or someone connected without permission?
I
It's
don't
either one
know.
or
I
the
haven't
other.
talked to the new owner.
But you're gonna talk to the new owner. Right, I wouldn't, there's no, I don't think there's any reason to sugarcoat this, because they need to know that there's an issue here. Kinda crazy.
Well, sounds like an appointment at our next meeting. Right?
I don't know, the thing is, it may be a little early for that, I think we need all the information from all the people. And again, like I said, once the closing happens, you know what happens
I
after
know.
closing.
Well,
The checks go out, the checks get cashed, and it's done,
Right.
and there's no leverage.
well, and that's the exact situation here. I mean, some unsuspecting person
Yeah.
has purchased this property. They
Probably
don't know
check
anything
the other
about it.
places on
no.
Sunset
And-
Drive.
So,
And again, everyone, including the brokers, want the closing to go smoothly.
absolutely, and it did.
It did, but,
And it did, yeah.
yeah, but I don't know, did someone withhold information that they
Well,
should have shared?
potentially, and that's why I say that.
Yeah.
You don't know if
Potentially,
the
it's a-
broker withheld it
Would be-
intentionally or had no
would be
clue of his
To
responsibility.
get the owner here and ask some questions.
The
new owner.
previous owner?
Well, the only person we're gonna hold responsible for the property is the current owner. We're not gonna call up the guy who sold the place and say, hey,
Can't,
come in here and talk.
has
to
to be
me.
the current owner.
Yeah. But one of the biggest issues in my head is the actual connection. I mean, who knows what they did? If someone along the line
I
did the
personally think
connection themselves in a
we should,
really
we
bad
should move
fashion.
forward. We should tell the new owner he's gotta put in a meter and start his readings from that point on and let bygones be bygones. Going back, trying to chase things, or strapping a new guy unsuspectedly after he's already committed to buy the house. I don't think that's the right thing to do either. And, we didn't know it, so
Right.
apparently we didn't miss the money, you know, so that's what that would be my opinion.
I agree with you, Paul, on that, but I still, the bigger issue for me is the inspection.
How would would a camera of the
Well,
line be enough, or would you?
Maybe they already did that. You said that someone cameraed the line and found out
I
that.
believe so, but it wasn't
Maybe we
recorded.
find out that it wasn't recorded.
Why? Yeah, I don't
A
think,
lot of times they do.
yeah, I'm not sure. I can ask.
So how do we find out if there's other ones like this?
If not, it needs to be done by us.
Is this a
I don't
gravity
know
one,
what-
Pete?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah.
No way.
Another reason not to
How do we
stop taking
find
the
out if there's
property.
other ones like this?
You'd have to camera
Camera,
your entire line, camera your system.
and even then,
Yeah,
you'd
yeah,
have to
they
go
don't
up
check.
every single
Right.
line.
Every single lateral.
It's almost impossible.
Something to think about for, not that, but anytime a house is sold. Something to think
That's,
about.
yeah, that would be really tough to nail down.
But I don't think we should just say, well, you got free sewer for 10 years.
If the current property owner didn't get free sewer for 10 years.
That's not what I said, I said the seller.
Next.
All right, so moving forward, I'm just gonna get the new owner to get the meter. What else do you want me to get you for information?
Well, we need some inspection on the line, right?
I guess,
I mean, how do you know-
in general, do we think
How do you
that?
know that's not a source of
Well, that's,
water
well, right, no,
infiltration? I mean,
well, by
maybe
all
they
means,
stuck the
you
perimeter
could do
drain in
that.
there too, you know? It's like, I don't know.
I just don't think that the former owner should just slide on this.
Again,
I think
So-
you're going to.
so the previous owner purchased it in 2010. It could have been installed prior to him.
Could have been. Could have
The
been.
owner, I don't know who the owner in the record, but I do.
Yeah.
Like you say, he got his betterment fee, he thought that was the sewer bill. Or what he was paying for the usage he was getting.
Property comes with free sewer. That's why the other guy bought it.
Not
No, 'cause-
anymore, but.
They got the betterment. They're getting charged for sewer.
No, monthly items.
But, so,
All right. So you'll find out more information.
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, moving on. Special town meeting. There's 3 items that we're gonna have on the special town meeting is Monday, October 15th at 7 PM. The first is just an interdepartmental transfer, which will be in the article with everybody else's interdepartmental transfer. And that's the transfer from the receipts reserved for appropriation from the water superintendent's salary to our sewer department salary line item, based on the motion that was made for the Kevin Pecos funding. So that'll be there. The second article is an article for us, and that's a drainage easement on Old Worcester Road for a new culvert that's being installed based on part of the water line project. So there's an existing, I believe it's a 72-inch corrugated metal pipe that's there for drainage, and it's been there for a long time, and it was kind of crossed once when the sewer line was installed, and they're redesigning it, so they're removing the 72-inch pipe, and they're gonna put a couple of box culvert in there instead. And because of that, they have to change how the culvert goes in and goes out, and where it exits is onto private property, so we're getting an easement from that property owner to be able to do that. And it has to be approved at town meeting. So, should be pretty straightforward. The property owner's been very cooperative with us as far as the easement goes, so. It just
Yeah,
has,
there's just easement, there's no dollar sign attached to it, doing this, is there, on the town meeting?
the agreement says less than $100, so I'm not,
Where is this down by,
All right,
is
it's
this
just-
right down by the orchard?
it's just before the orchard, yeah, the initial S,
Exactly,
the
right at that
initial S
curve.
turn.
Yeah.
There's
Right
a,
at the curve.
there's a big culvert pipe
Okay,
right
yeah,
there.
yeah.
So that'll be replaced. And the last item I wanted to put forward for special town meeting, and Donna alluded to, was the creation of two separate accounts, one water stabilization account and one sewer stabilization account. And the main reason is, as Donna said, when you look at retained earnings, you think that that money's just sitting there where you can track it and use it. I think it's better off, I think if we could take a portion of those retained earnings annually and transfer them into a stabilization account for water and for sewer. That way there, we can see how much we're saving, and we'll know how much is there to start funding future capital projects that are gonna be coming. So, she's been working with Cosgrove on those. I think it's a good way, I think, for us to track it and to know what we have set aside for capital improvements moving forward. Whether we take it, again, depending on how much our retained earnings are, take a certain portion of that, again, as you asked, Mr. Lemansky, I'll talk to Dawn and see how much would she recommend for us to take out of there and still have enough retained earnings to cover what we have for our balances and stuff like that, so.
And the stabilization fund is a non-interest-bearing fund?
No, she said it was interest
It
bearing.
was interest-bearing.
That's why I asked, because we're not gonna be pulling on this monthly or even annually unless we go to town meeting for approval, we could find different ways to invest that for 3, 6, 9, 12-month periods if we choose to. So if you, and again, in Donna's sewer line item, she found the capital item that had $917,000 in it, that I remember seeing somewhere from Keith way back when, that was just sitting there, and she didn't know where it came from, but she knows it's there, that we can transfer into the stabilization account, as well as a portion of our retained earnings, if you choose to do so. So that could give us, say we transferred $200,000 or $300,000 from retained earnings, leave $500,000 in there, we could have possibly $1.2 million sitting in that stabilization account for sewer capital projects.
900 grand laying around, no one knows where it came from.
I was just, again, looking at her accounts and.
Yeah, well, no, it'll take it.
But I remember seeing it, when Keith always itemized things differently, and it just, that was the one account I was worried about just kinda going away, and it didn't. It showed up tonight when she was here, and she said she transferred that somewhere else, and that fund that money is sitting there. And it won't affect I'm gonna double check with her, but she said it won't affect our retained earnings, so. We can transfer that into the stabilization account, and you know where it is, and you know how much is there. And then we can fund projects from that. So, those are my thoughts for creating the stabilization accounts. And then for water, again, it's up to $260,000 if you wanna transfer some out. I think it's just,
Why do I still have 1.5 in my brain?
that's in a receipt reserve for
Okay,
appropriation
right,
account. So
Donna
that's
told us about that.
allocated for capital only.
Okay, and that's gonna be
So-
another account that we have.
That shows up as a line, as a line in the water budget, yes. Not as retained earnings, though.
Pretty much one and the same, though, isn't it?
Yes and no.
Again, I know it's specific what we can use it for. We can't use it to pay bills or shortage, but this use is specified. What's in there?
But it's a real number you can track. Every time I mention retained earnings, it's a number that doesn't exist. It's just a number that they use. I think if we, much like, the town does this with the general fund. They take their free cash that's certified every year and transfer the entire amount into stabilization. And then they fund all their capital expenditures from there with the money that wasn't spent from the previous year's budget. So it's kind of the same process, and for me, I think it's cleaner, and I think it would be moving forward with capital projects, if we can start to save that money moving forward and have a real number to look at, I think it'll be beneficial. So. Okay, those are the three items the commission's gonna have on special town meeting. If there's an objection to the stabilization accounts, then we can scrap them if you like, but,
I don't have an objection.
okay,
Just make sure we see the language, Peter, before it happens.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Not at 6:59.
the placeholders are there, Donna's working with
Thank you.
Cosgrove now to get the language. Sewer construction standards. Part of your matrix was to create rules and regulations, or policies and regulations that work with the bylaws. So I started looking at other communities and what they had for policies and regulations, and I started looking at our bylaws. And it seems, as I read through our bylaws, they seem pretty consistent, and they seem to cover a lot of the issues we may have. What we're missing is construction standards. So I looked through some other communities, found some construction standards that kind of made sense, and tried to kind of make them into something that we can start with to possibly start talking about construction standards. So when a contractor comes and asks, how do I want them to make this connection, we can point them to our construction standards, show them the detailed drawing, and they'll know where to go, and it will be consistent. Our bylaws are, again, if you look through them, it pretty much covers everything we need to do, from sewer extensions to industrial pretreatment programs and permits, and it seems to cover a lot of stuff. And to change those, you have to go to town meeting for approval. These construction standards, I believe, can be adopted by the board, and we can change them as we see fit based on new technologies or other items you might want to add or delete. So I'm not asking you to approve them today, I just wanted to put these in front of you to kind of ask you if this is a direction you might want to go, and you can review what I submitted to you, and again, make changes or additions or deletions, and we can, if you think this might be a direction we can go, then we can continue to move it forward.
So Peter, what's in here? Is this a combination of ours with some additions, or is this?
We don't have construction standards.
Okay, so this is all.
We don't have anything. As
Okay.
far as water goes, you voted to adopt Southbridge's
Okay.
construction standards. So water, you're somewhat all set because you've adopted Southbridge's, and you're just consistent with that.
All right, and you borrowed these from somebody?
Yes. Yeah. And I do have copies of the detailed drawings. I didn't make copies for everyone just because it was another 18 pages or so. But again, if you're interested in this, please read it, let me know what you like, what you don't like, and we can change them to custom fit what we wanna do with it. None of it's set in stone, so I think it can be pretty useful. I'll just look for your comments on those, and again, we can just put them forward as we go.
Would be part of the ongoing discussion with number 7.
Could be, I guess.
Guideline and policy procedures?
I don't have anything for
None for that?
that. Sorry, I don't. So,
I think this came on our agenda from our workshop, and we wanted to start working on guidelines and policies and procedures. Is that
Yes.
how it wound up here? Yep, okay. So, I guess this is partly like the construction standards. When,
Okay.
I guess, I myself personally feel that we need more guidelines and policies, and procedures for this board moving forward. And that's been, I think, a common thread with a lot of the meetings as of late. I don't know if I'm alone in
No,
that, or.
that's what we talked about.
again, I wasn't at that workshop, so I don't know if you guys want, or where you're gonna go with it, if I should recuse myself and you can have the discussion
No.
moving forward, or
No,
if
you
there's no
don't
need for that.
It's
Okay.
just general
Just
guidelines
yeah,
and policies.
Not specific, so
Okay.
just general policies.
So, is it something that fits in the, so we have two things, is what you're talking about, does it fit better in our bylaws? Or does it fit better in construction standards?
No, definitely bylaws.
But,
Okay.
yeah,
So moving forward, we can talk about language, or we can find the spot in the bylaws that this needs to be added or changed. And we'll have to now wait. I could ask to get on for a special town meeting, if you think you'll have it ready for that. If
No.
not, we can do it at the annual.
We won't be ready.
Okay.
I think it's gonna have to be reviewed by not only us, but, it's gonna have to go before the town accountant, who else, the collector, right? Alex? You
Yeah.
have those questions?
Yeah, tax collector.
So,
Okay, so these are just guidelines and procedures, not referencing
Yep.
any single
no,
property, just how
no
to move
property,
forward.
just, yep.
Okay,
When we institute a fine, how's it collected, what's policy, what's procedure,
okay. And where's this at now?
day one.
And we'll just move this forward to get it ready for the annual town meeting, to make changes to the bylaws?
Yep.
Okay,
Yes.
plenty of time.
Not October. No, definitely not.
Okay. Good enough. Is there anything else?
Superintendent report, or have you already covered most of your stuff?
I covered some of it, but just moving forward, Berry Corner Road, again, Ludlow Construction continues to install the water main. They have just about 9,100 feet of main installed. They're almost completed with Berry Corner Road. The last probably 400 feet, they've hit some severe ledge, hard ledge up there that's not easy to hammer. But they should be at Ayers Road soon, and then they're gonna backtrack and start working Each Foot Road, installing water main. What they've been doing is as they install main and hit ledge, they split the crew, and half the crew goes back and starts doing service connections. So far, they've installed 14 hydrants. There's one more they have to install on Berry Corner Road. They've installed 52 corporations on the main that has been installed, and from those 52 corporations, they've gone back and installed 35 service connections to the property line. So they're gonna start, once Berry Corner Road's done, they're gonna start heading down Each Foot Road, and as they hit ledge, they'll go back and start doing service connections from there to try and finish Berry Corner Road. Their hope is to be done with the main and service connections this construction season, come back next year and just do all the private property service connections off the roadway. Depending on what they hit for rock on H-Foot Road will determine that. So they're moving pretty good. Things seem to be going well. There hasn't been too many hiccups with traffic, I don't believe, or that many complaints at all to our office, so things are moving forward. Route 169 pump station, RH White has been on site. They've installed the water line off of Snake Hill Road, and the discharge and inlet line into the pump station area. They've installed the LP tank pad, and they've excavated for the infiltration chamber and catch basin. They're gonna continue to install the suction and discharge piping, install drain lines, and excavate for the generator pad and build a foundation moving forward. So that's moving forward, a little bit of a slower pace, but it's getting done. The school loop, we have our initial pre-construction meeting this Thursday with Albanese Brothers and Kleinfelder at the library at 10 a.m. If there's gonna be more than 2 of you who plan to attend, let me know so I can post it.
Please send me a reminder, okay, Pete?
Sure. You wanna attend?
I cannot.
Okay.
Just urge them to do it at night, that's all.
What's that, these?
I won't be
Or the
there.
project?
The work.
The work, yeah. We're not Mass Highway, are we? So that's gonna start moving forward. Initial discussion is they're gonna try and prioritize the water main going up to Overlook to get done this fall. So hopefully if that happens, we can get Kleinfelder to design that pump station, get that installed in the spring, and have the Overlook connected to the water line sooner than later as a priority. Buffinville, at your last meeting, you approved moving forward with additional pump testing at well site 2. The well has been ordered, and the test should take place the week of September 17th. So hopefully it'll be a 3-day test. I'll have some results on that for you, your next meeting is September 24th. The Board of Selectmen, I plan on attending their meeting tomorrow night, just to give them a quick update on what's happening on with those 4 projects that I just kind of updated you guys on, kind of the same thing. Williamson Environmental is coordinating, connecting 2 properties along South Sturbridge Road and 1 property on Power Station Road to water as part of the Honey Farms water stuff. So you'll be seeing some water connections going on there. P&P Construction has pulled the demolition permits for the 2 properties that are connected to water and sewer on Maple Street as part of Ted's project to build a storage garage. So there's not gonna be any water or sewer infrastructure to the new building, it's just gonna be straight storage for them. So those, I think they're 2-3 families, I'm not sure, I think they might have been vacant for a while, but you'll see they're gonna disconnect from water and sewer.
Started deconstruction today.
Did they?
Yeah.
I saw they were dropping off some equipment, so they're moving forward, and that's why, so when you see that. John Oatley, Steve, and myself met with representatives from McDonald's up at 5 East to talk about the concentration of their waste and what they might be able to do to possibly pre-treat so we don't see those high levels of ammonia coming from them at sporadic times. So leaving that meeting, John Oatley's supposed to get them some names of local engineering companies that could do some initial meetings with them to talk about what they can design for them to possibly install to help handle that concern. As McDonald's looking at it, I believe they have 9 years left on their existing lease, so it's gonna come down to a cost-benefit analysis on whether or not they'll pay to install what could be done for pre-treatment or just continue to pay the surcharges. So, moving forward, looking at our rates and looking at increasing our surcharges, I think it's definitely we need to do. But I think we also need to look at the other commercial users on our system and start to test them more frequently as well, so. I have been
With
working
that
on
9% increase last year, was that on surcharges as well?
I did increase the surcharges as
Okay.
well, yes. I don't know if you specified it, but they did go up 9%.
Okay.
So we'll be interested to see where that goes. I was moving forward. There's a conflict of interest law seminar on Tuesday, September 18th. The first one is from 3 to 4:30, and the second is from 6 to 7:30. If you'd like to sign up, you can contact Mary Devlin or let Sewer I know. and we can get you on the list. And now, my one-year working anniversary is coming up in October. Part of my employment letter says that we need to complete a performance review on or near 1 year of employment. I've been talking with Jessica from HR, and she has given me some forms to use for the performance review and also for setting goals for the next year. I've included those forms, so if you guys want to review those and let me know how you want to move forward with it, that'd be great.
Can you
Nothing
do
we
a
have-
self-evaluation on yourself?
I can.
Perfect. Well, we always have to do it when I have to do mine.
I know.
So, I'm not letting them get off that easy.
So I believe, Mr. Chair, that's all I have in my superintendent's report, unless you guys have more questions for me.
Well, the business, anything that,
As far as
Okay, well,
old
says
business,
posting
no,
of
I don't
this,
believe we had any old business on the agenda, I
Well,
believe. Everything was covered.
somebody,
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
second, all those in favor? Aye, aye, aye.